Okay. Welcome, everyone. It looks like we are recording, and we are also live on YouTube. Today is June 23rd, 2020, and we will begin our regular City Council meeting. The time is 7:07 p.m. And I'm going to ask this council's forgiveness because I'd like to go ahead and welcome a guest and just be a little out of order with our agenda tonight, just to respect her time. But it is a coronavirus update. And without further ado, Summer, do you mind allowing Dr. Gaddis in on our
Sure.
call?
Do you want me to do a really quick roll call just so we let people know who's participating?
Oh, sure. My apologies.
Okay. Nope, that's okay. So we have Carly Castle, Assistant City Manager, Mayor Emily Niehaus, Ronnie Darasari, Moab City Council, Lori Simonson, City Attorney, Tawny Knutson Boyd, Moab City Council, Joel Linares, City Manager, Kaylin Jones, Moab City Council, Karen Guzman Newton, Moab City Council, Clint York, Finance Director, and Mike Duncan, Moab City Council. And Erica Gaddis is joining us.
Thank you so much, Summer. Welcome, Doctor. Erica, can you hear me? Let's see.
I show that she's connecting to audio.
Okay. Erica, let me know when you can hear us. Uh-oh.
Still connecting to audio.
Do you want to close off and then come back?
Do we need to write her a note?
I'm electronically transmitting a text to Erica asking her if she would like to log out and then come back.
You could also try phoning in for the audio component.
I wonder if it's, oh, okay, now you might be muted, but it looks like there's a, now we just want to unmute you, Erica.
Can you hear me now?
Yay!
Yay.
Welcome, Doctor, to the call. And thank you so much for calling in tonight. We are just getting started with our council meeting. We are out of order here with having you present first to be respectful of your time. But why don't you go ahead and introduce to my amazing council and staff here who you are, who you're with, and what the heck we're talking about tonight.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to join you this evening. My name is Erica Gaddis. I'm the Director of the Division of Water Quality for the state of Utah. I work with Mayor Niehaus. She serves on the Water Quality Board, and we have a meeting tomorrow morning. So you'll hear this presentation again tomorrow. Apologies. We got involved in a project a couple months ago related to testing COVID in wastewater, and we thought it might be interesting for you to hear some of our initial results. So I'm just going to pull up, if I can, share my screen. Let's try it. Can you all see that?
Yep, we can see it.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll just roll through this pretty quickly, and then I took a quick peek at the latest data from Moab and happy to answer any of your questions. So basically, this idea is not new. They've actually used this all over the world for a number of different epidemics to look at kind of community level prevalence of a disease by monitoring it in raw sewage or in wastewater influence. So the idea is that You may have a few individuals' homes that may be infected versus many that are not, but you can't maybe identify exactly which ones they are, but you can get a sense of the prevalence within a community. Our pilot study attempted to do this in partnership with 3 universities, University of Utah, Brigham Young University, and Utah State University. Dr. Jennifer Wiedis up at the University of Utah really initiated this work in early April and reached out to us to see if we could try and do something a little more organized. So we sampled 10 wastewater treatment plants across the state for a 6-week period. Those facilities represented about 40% of the state's population, and Moab is one of the 10 that volunteered to participate in our study. As you can see from this map, we tried to get facilities that are kind of in the heart of the urban corridor along the Wasatch Front, and then some that represented more rural parts of the state, some that were more tourist based, like Moab and Snyderville bases in the Park City area. We collected samples mid-April through May, and the 3 universities really spent a lot of time standardizing or making up a uniform method. There is still a lot of work in this space nationally and internationally, and actually I think Utah's ahead of the curve this time. So our key findings, we found the virus in all 10 of the wastewater treatment plants that we sampled. We found the virus in 64% of all the samples that we collected. Importantly, it was not detected in the effluent leaving the sewage treatment plants. So that's important for the public to understand that our treatment plants do a great job of disinfection, and we don't think there's a concern there. We were able to see large increases of virus in the Logan and Hiram facilities just ahead of the outbreak that was reported in the news towards the end of May. We found our highest concentrations in urban areas, and then maybe most relevant for you, we found higher concentrations in tourist communities like Moab and Park City than other cities or communities of similar size. And I'm happy I'll show you your data. So we've presented this work to Unified Command and to the local health departments and to the Department of Health, and they're interested in using this moving forward for a couple of different purposes. The first would be early detection of rising infections. On this graph, you can see what we were able to see in the wastewater just ahead of the spike in cases up in Cache Valley. In the urban areas, we could use this to get a little bit more detailed in terms of targeting community level monitoring. This map shows the heart of Salt Lake County, our largest facility in the state. We were able to get wastewater from 7 different lines that come into that community, and you can see a much larger circle or higher prevalence of virus in West Valley City than in some of the more on the eastern side of that sewer district. This also could be a potentially useful tool to confirm low levels of infection in areas of the state where we think there isn't a big problem. So these data come from Tremont and Price, and you can see for the most part, we did not detect the virus in those facilities with a couple exceptions in early and mid-May. And then this is the data from East Canyon, so the Park City area. We were able to see the decline in overall infection rates that followed the trends in case counts. So, there's a lot of messiness in wastewater sampling, and we were pretty happy to see that this actually seemed to work even better than maybe we thought it would. So our next steps are to use this tool to assist in Utah's response to COVID-19. We really have no role here other than to help and serve our public health partners. We're a little bit outside of our lane, but we have some really smart scientists that are willing to help, and we've been given some funding from Unified Command to carry this forward to 40 facilities across the state beginning in July. We've identified 30 treatment plants that are greater than 1 million gallons a day. That's about 10,000 people. That's about the size of the Moab facility, actually. And 10 rural treatment plants that are a little bit smaller that we've identified for a number of reasons. You can see Springdale down there wanting to capture another tourist community. We've got Moroni in there as a meatpacking community in the state. So we've picked out a couple of others on the rural side. And together, those represent 75 to 80% of the state's population. So our plan right now, as it stands, is to sample all of those facilities weekly, and Moab will continue to be one of those 40 facilities. And then we've got capacity within the labs to do an extra 20 samples a week. So if we see a spike or we see a pattern that might be interesting and the health departments want to see something a little more fine-grained, we can provide that as needed. And that's really it. Let me just zoom over here to our dashboard if you want to spend some time later looking at this. We've put a nice little data dashboard together. We're right now in the process of transitioning to a more active database or active data dashboard. So I hope you can see this is our data dashboard. This is all public. There's a quick overview here of kind of what we found, our pilot scale results, so you can compare Moab to some of the other facilities kind of over the course of the study. And then on the detailed facility results page, you can see the data for each particular community. And I'm going to switch this to log scale because Moab's data was pretty low, but it wasn't non-detect. And so you can see you guys were kind of bumping around here a little bit higher than we would have expected compared to, say, Price, so your closest neighbor. I will tell you that the most recent 3 weeks of data are very low for the Moab facility, non-detect last week. So hope that gives you some comfort. Anyway, that's what we've done. That's what we're doing. And we hope it proves useful to you all down in Southern Utah and to our local health departments.
Erica, thank you so much for this presentation. If you don't mind, we'll go ahead and unshare your
Yes.
your screen and just give the council an opportunity to ask any burning questions that they have, starting with Mike.
So Eric, I see that you had, what was it, 10 squared or 10 cubed, as you say, bumping around up until about May 7th or so, May 17th, I'm sorry. And that was
Yes.
just preceding the Memorial Day weekend when we got flooded with people. And I kind of expected to see an increase in
The opposite.
Yeah. So it didn't really work out the way I expected. You know why?
I have no idea. I can tell you that the wastewater flows went up, let's see, on May 17th. They doubled actually. So you're typically got about 1 million gallons a day into your treatment facility, and you bumped up to 2 million that week. So I don't know if that's reflective of increased usage. It's now back down closer to 1 million gallons a day coming in. So yeah, I mean, I would have expected the same, that you know, as things opened up and tourists started to return, that you would see perhaps a but maybe I don't know. I can't speak to the pattern. We'll just have to see if it continues.
Delighted to have you guys doing this. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Erica, I will share with the council the website that you had just pulled up so that they can, after this meeting, dig in.
Great. Very good.
Ronnie?
Oh, I just had a quick question, Erica. So I think the first number I saw that kind of caught my attention was in that Salt Lake Tribune article about the 10 tests. And somehow I thought just in your presentation, there was that reference to 66% for Moab. And so can you just clarify what that was? Because I think briefly anyway, we were like, oh, okay. So like testing on one day where combined our population and our tourists, you know, we're 66% positive. So can you just clarify that for me? Because I think that confused me.
You're muted, Erica. Sorry, start over. You're still muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. So 66% of the samples we collected showed a detection of at some level. So 34% of the samples we did not detect the virus. So over the course of the 6-week study, we were collecting samples twice a week. So we'd have to do the, about 8 of the samples, we detected the virus at some concentration.
Ah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Erica? Dr. Gaddis? Kaylin?
Sorry if I missed this, but what is the turnaround time from when you get samples to when you publish or let the local health department know?
Yeah, so we're still working on operationalizing this. The labs can turn samples around in about 48 hours. So you collect it, it takes a day to collect the sample, then it takes a day to get it to the lab, 2 days for them to analyze it, and then we're gonna try and turn that around as quickly as possible. So you're looking at probably 3 to 5 days delay in the samples, but we still think we're seeing up to a week of information ahead of what you're seeing clinically.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Erica, thank you so much for joining us for this update, because we were all definitely interested in this data because it really is such a unique snapshot of the presence of the virus in our community.
Great. Well, I hope it's helpful, and you have a good meeting, and I'll see you in the morning.
Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, I'm so honored to serve on her board. Okay, so moving forward on our agenda, thank you again, Summer, for doing a roll call for us. And we are now at section 2, approval of the minutes for May 29, 2020, which was a special meeting. Is there a motion to approve? Karen?
I move to approve minutes from May 29th.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ronnie, and discussion?
I just sent a few things to Summer. She already took care of them. Yeah.
Okay, any other edits from council members? Okay, somebody phoning in a friend there? Okay, I will call for the roll call vote. Ronnie?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Hi.
Motion passes 5-0. We're on to mayor and council reports. I will be brief. I was asked to participate on a board that was developed by the Grand County Council Economic Development Director, Zachariah Levine, and to represent the city. Basically, with SB 95, the counties are going to be receiving funding from GOED to support the economic development of counties. They all counties get a flat 200,000 plus the ability to apply for additional funds. However, caveat, what with coronavirus and budget shortfalls, that funding might be in jeopardy. Regardless, I was asked to represent the city on that board, and I've attended a meeting so far, and it's a good group. If anyone's interested in learning more about that board, please feel free to contact me. I was asked by the Office of Outdoor Recreation to present to the Western Governors Association online meeting last week, and on how gateway communities have been affected by coronavirus. So I basically told our story, and that was, I shared the good, the bad, and the ugly of coronavirus for us as a gateway community. But that, there's lemonade. I also attended the League of Cities and Towns board meeting, which then informed conversation during the LPC. And I just had a few things I wanted to share. I'm going to email alongside the website from Erica. I'm going to email GOED updates, the business.utah.gov. There's a summary online that really explains additional, the list of GOED things available, but gosh, just one second. Okay, so Utah Leads Together 4.0 is the new guiding document. And it's important to note that is really all about economic recovery, that there's this 100-day plan to maximize the care dollars, stay open and stay safe program. Then there's the 250-day plan to fund things like infrastructure for transit, transportation, water, and important for us, outdoor rec and trails. So this is a really important time for us to think, what are the projects that we want to see manifested in our community, whether it's trails or with outdoor recreation, because this is the time to put our ideas on paper and get organized. And then there's the 500-day, the reimagined incentives, continuing with outdoor recreation and affordable housing, manufacturing, food, broadband, focus on rural and more. So I wanted to share that because it does feel like we are being represented in that Utah Leads 4.0, both as a rural community, but also as a gateway community. I wanted to share something interesting. So the League of Cities and Towns, as you know, lobbies on our behalf, and they've got 3 tiers of how they're going to focus moving forward with our 2020 issues and the wild ride that's going on at the legislature with all of these interim moments. But their top concern is looking at CARES Act funding, water conservation, public infrastructure districts, community trust, and public safety. Tier 2 is gravel pits, inland port, amicus, metro townships, land use task force, EMS, transportation utility fee, and justice courts. And then tier 3, a handful of items, one of which is plastic bags, which I was surprised to see still on that list. But it is still on the radar of the League of Cities and Towns. And then finally, I wanted to report that as a board, and then it was brought to LPC, that the League of Cities and Towns does support the banning of chokeholds, the use of force, officer misconduct, and so as a league, we did vote to support that legislation in the next session. So I just wanted to say that ahead of Brett's presentation tonight, because that was some helpful information. Let's see. I also, I was asked by the league to testify on a political subdivision committee. And I was sitting where I am right now, and I said to the legislators, I never thought I'd have this many legislators in my living room. And I reported how grateful I was with that. Some of the lemonade of the coronavirus means that we in rural Utah get to participate sort of at the same level as those along the Wasatch Front. And I do think that we've got a bigger presence because of that. So I encourage this council to zoom in and continue to participate and set up calls with different legislators, if you wish, to talk about issues, because this is a time where everybody is meeting online, and it's a really unique opportunity for us. But I basically testified what's going on here in Moab and in rural Utah. I attended a Mill Creek Community Collaborative 2 meetings, one of which the whole group got together and we discussed, we've drilled down 4 different ideas of the management of the powerhouse, the Mill Creek powerhouse area. And we're going to be bringing that out to the public, where the public's going to weigh in on those 4 alternative management options. And I suspect we're going to have some really heated discussions around how to manage powerhouse, but I'm very grateful to the committee for coming together with the options that we're planning to present to the community so that we can have good feedback moving forward as we, Moab City, and other agencies like the BLM and the county move to do some management work, as we know that area gets quite busy during the busy season. So that's coming soon. We're developing the survey and we'll be putting it out soon. What else? I said I was, so I part of the subcommittee through GoEd for resources, and I will send that email address, or sorry, that website to all of you to be able to, I won't read it now, but to be able to look through it and make sure that we're connecting our businesses in Moab with resources that are available, because there's the crisis of getting through coronavirus, but then there's also the like, where are entrepreneurs? We still want to incentivize new business and new growth. And so, you know, as we listen to our local entrepreneurs, let's connect them to resources at the state. And then finally, I'm going to share with you a white paper that I wrote for the Governor's Rural Partnership Board, of which I serve, and we have a meeting tomorrow. And that is it from me. Ronnie, you are up.
Okay. We had an EMS meeting on June 15th, our board member for this board meeting for the Special Service District. I'll see if I can read my chicken scratch. Our call volume is returning pretty significantly, and we had 136 calls this May compared to 156 last May. And just reminding people that the number of calls that come in doesn't necessarily equate to the number of patients. Like one call could have multiple people who need assistance. So anyway, overall for the year, EMS is down about 6% from 2019, and they're expecting so far that it'll come to about, by year's end, will be about semi-normal, but probably not as high as 2019. Last time I reported to you, we were thinking we're probably looking at about $400,000 shortfall, you know, compared to what we were hoping for this year. So staff did go through the budget with the board, and we made some tentative cuts. This will all have to come back, which got us to about 200. They're moving ahead with the building. Most of the time on that is going to be in the design phase. I have some sketches if anybody's interested that I can share from our meeting. We are going to meet with our auditor later this week. And let's see, I know you guys like some statistics on calls. So let's see, for May, 60 were local, 50 were non-residents, and mixed in all that, there were 33 refusals. Sometimes you get a call and then somebody doesn't actually want help. 40% generated out of the city, 20% combined out of Grand County, both closer to us in the backcountry in Grand County, 4% in Green River, 10% canceled. You know, sometimes people call in and some other first responder gets there first, or they just get up, you know, I don't know, lots of explanations for that one. And let's just say, in case anyone was curious, no EMS calls or no services needed during the Black Lives Matter protest. However, they did have to respond to 3 other calls in the course of the time that was going on that were non-related. And let's see, other than that, like the rest of you, I think I'm drowning in email. Several of us partook, and I'll let someone else comment on it, on the Mountain Towns 2030. I guess it was kind of a webinar on net zero progress in the era of COVID and how we can all advance climate change work. Given everything that's going on, some good reports there. I wanted to thank the mayor because and I wanted to thank the editor of the Times Independent for the reporting that educated us all about the death at Arches and the passing of Esther Nakajigo. And I'm going to apologize if I pronounce that wrong, but thanks to the mayor and Representative Curtis's office, I think, you know, they're trying to help out because the family back in Uganda is trying to repatriate Esther's body. And I just wanted to send condolences to the family. I understand. I just wanted to check in with staff because we got some questions about lines back, and some people have been wondering what's happening with dirt moving. So are we just supposed to send people with questions to Lisa? And that was just a question I'll leave hanging out there till we get to Joel. And I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Mike, you're next.
Okay, the Carly chaired another water advisory board meeting. It's pretty quiet actually on that front right at the moment. So much other stuff going on, but there is in 2021 coming up in August, I believe, of that year, a mandatory water conservation report to be an update one we put out a few years ago. And most of it is staff written stuff about what the city does and so forth. But there's also some chapters on water conservation measures and sources of water, both groundwater and surface water that might be put to use. And one of these days we will get past COVID and all the rest of the stuff, and water will return as an important issue, but not so much right at the moment. The other thing is hotspot. I'm on a hotspot focus committee now, lucky me, and it's been a good part of a man week, kind of playing Chuck Williams, if you will, and Mark Derlicent in looking at parking designs on downtown area. And I came up that if you took a 4-block area surrounding Main and Center and all the streets around the perimeter of that, if you were willing to take out the bike lanes on First West, we could maybe get 100 new spots. Unfortunately, nobody wants to take out the bike lanes. And so my next order of business is to investigate a wider area up closer to city center, maybe a little farther north and south. And maybe some of the east-west streets, which are going to be a little bit problematic because sometimes they're residential in nature. Some of those residents aren't going to like a lot of parking in front of their street. But if we're to qualify, on the terms of reducing congestion with more off Main Street parking, that'd be the way we're going to have to do it. So that's what we're working on now. That's where hotspot is at right at the moment.
Mike, can you clarify when you say no one was interested in taking the bike lanes off of 100 West?
Mm-hmm.
Is that no one at the hotspot committee was interested in looking at that?
No one on the focus committee was interested. Kalen was not. Wes Shannon was not. He's the head of the Downtown Business Alliance. And let's see who else is in there that matters. But I don't remember anybody else commenting positively about it. I'm not really for it either. I'm looking for a way to get a bunch of additional spots that I can't find any other way at the moment. So I just threw it out there, and it does provide you a bunch of extra parking spaces. But again, nobody wants to make that trade at the moment in the focus group.
Okay.
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that report. Next up is Tawny.
Yep. Okay, I was supposed to attend a care center board and the invite went to my wrong email account, so I missed it. But I chatted with Joette and her quote was, "It was a long, boring meeting. You didn't miss anything." It was basically administrative and financial. They, like everyone else, are kind of scrambling to figure out where they're going to make up lost revenue and how they're going to do that. There so far have not been any cases of COVID in our care center, which is pretty amazing considering that's where a lot of the cases up north have been or has been in care centers. So kudos to our staff for keeping those residents as safe as they have. There was a little bit of discussion about how to get families to be able to visit with those folks. And it sounds like as long as the weather's nice and they want to, they're going to try and devise some visiting hours outside so that people will get to see their families. And that, I think that will go a long way to help those residents, just their spirits, and know that they're not alone. So I attended the museum board meeting, and we had 2 museum board members resigned. There were some differences of opinion about how the museum handled some of the messaging during the protests. But letters of acknowledgement and thanks went to both of those board members, recognizing what they had brought to the board. And in doing it, and because of that, the museum did put out a statement acknowledging that they supported justice and racial equality, and I do believe it is on their website if you would like to read it. That in turn precipitated a discussion about where Moab Museum wants to head. Some of the reopening plans obviously have been delayed because of COVID, and because in short, some of the displays and the exhibits just were not ready, and they're still being installed. But we, in our discussions about where we would like to go, I had to do homework. We had homework. There were some TED Talks and some other seminars that we listened to, and it really opened my eyes about what museums are in different communities and how things are displayed and what is displayed and who is honored in museums. And the biggest thing that I got out of all of those TED Talks was our society has largely been male-centric, and those are the people who decided what went into museums. And for some reason, museums seem to honor the extraordinary, not the ordinary. And one of the speakers challenged us, if we were going to curate someone that we loved, how would you want someone that you loved curated? And it kind of takes you down a little rabbit hole for a little bit. Or how would you like to be curated? How would you like to be remembered in 50 or 100 years? So that was extremely interesting. We are working on installing the final exhibits and training staff for staff and trustees with health and safety procedures and how to properly explain and honor the exhibits that we will have. Couple of small grants from the Utah State Historic Records Advisory Board and from the Utah Humanities Council. They were small grants, $5,000 and $7,500. The one from the Humanities Council was to continue to collect oral histories. And the one from the Utah State Historic Records Advisory Board, there's an acronym, but I can't say it. My tongue won't do that. And that was used to buy a couple of specialty scanners to scan the Barnes collection, which is a huge donation of documents and items. And I also, sorry, I'm hurrying, attended the HASU board meeting. And as you might guess, most of that discussion was related to 2021 fiscal year budget. They have done a really good job of creating a sustainable budget, even in these trying times. And they've incorporated room for growth and just to help to fund future endeavors that HASU wants to do. The senior housing project is basically completed with construction. I think this week they are waiting to do a couple of walkthroughs on just a few checkoff items. There are 15 approvals for new residents to move in, with 5 pending, or that was as of last week. There may be some more. They are planning to start to move people in the end of June. And Joel, if you can just either get this info to me or email it or whatever. I sent an email last week while I was in the meeting that Ben would like to know who his contact is at the city now. We committed a $3,500 gift to the MAP Senior Project, and he's just wants to reach out.
3,500 or 35,000?
35,000. I'm sorry. 35,000.
That's 3,500 he's got. Yeah.
My zeros are running together. If you could just get me who his contact is or get a hold of Ben. That's all he wants to know about that.
I'll get a hold of Ben.
Okay. And construction has begun on the multifamily portion of Wingate Village. And I think this week they were going to pour foundations on 5 of the 11 self-help households in Wingate Village. And HASU will monitor that construction and begin to give some attention to the new construction at Arroyo Crossing. And the COVID-19 Task Force Rent Relief Fund has served 40 families and given out roughly $30,000. And I think as of last week at the meeting, there was still a little bit of money left, and they were just planning on distributing that as it was requested and needed. That's it.
Hey, Tony, where is the Wingate housing? Is that next to those condo? What is that development that's going on there? Is that?
It's way south. It's out behind the KOA campground, kind of in there. There's kind of a triangle piece of property, and it's behind the KOA campground and the arena.
Okay. Do you guys know what that construction is happening next to those high-end condominiums off of the highway? And it almost looks like an apartment, but could be a hotel, and it's really far south. Is that affordable housing, or is it?
Is it right on the highway?
It's right on the highway. Like it's before those, where that construction is happening with the really big.
I know where you're talking about, Karen. I'm not sure what that development is.
Past the arena, but not clear to Rim Village, right?
It's before Rim Village.
Yeah, but past the arena?
Before the Shell station.
I'm pretty sure it's a hotel.
Oh, before the Shell station, next to the little RV park.
It's where Dowd Flats used to be, or is.
Yes.
It's a hotel.
Oh, gotcha.
Hotel.
Okay, did not know that. Thought it might be affordable housing. Never mind.
Not that affordable.
Thank you, Tawny. Next up, I skipped Mike. Mike, you're next. Oh, you presented. You spoke. Sorry. I'm all screwed up because of our not being in our council. Karen is next. Sorry.
Okay, so we had a brief meeting with the chamber and city staff and the mayor about the 4th of July celebration after a council meeting 2 weeks ago. Emily, there's some concern of businesses to sign up. So I know we had an email today from an interested business that would like to do a booth or help out in some way, but the response has been really minimal with the chamber to get people to participate this year. And there was some concerns about COVID numbers and, trying to run an event like 4th of July with a mass group of people when the numbers in the state are running higher than they have been, even though that we are still at 0. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and hopefully we could have a brief discussion about that.
Yeah, we can talk about that because it's on our agenda for actual discussions.
Great. And then the mountain towns net zero, I'll let Kaylin talk about that more. I'll leave that to him. But some of the interesting things that I found from that meeting was that just the different communities, what they're trying to do with COVID and trying to help business. And, they're fortunate enough to be able to close down their main street. UDOT owns our main street. It's not a possibility for us, but creating, equitable public spaces and how that has had a positive effect on climate is an interesting, to think about having downtown spaces that don't include cars. Sounds like a dream. Anyway, so and then I sat in on the economic response task force town hall with the Salt Lake Chamber. Emily, you went into a lot of the information that was presented. It was Herbert discussed briefly the interim session that started last week and how there's 28 items on the special session agenda. Most of them have to do with economic restructuring due to the loss of revenue impacts at the state levels. And the chamber has started a new campaign, and it's called Stay Safe to Stay Open. And they're going to try to get businesses to pledge support for this campaign so that we can open up. And we've moved from flattening the curve to protecting the hive, which is protecting, you know, the most vulnerable in our community. So that was interesting, and the governor really made a point to talk about using the CARES Act funding to invest in the large scale infrastructure projects, which, like you mentioned, Emily, and you know, some of those are the electrical vehicle charging station, broadband, public transit, highways, dams, sewer treatment plants. And there seems to be, through COVID, a real shift as to how important outdoor recreation is to people who live in Utah. And the outdoor rec director, Pitt Gruey, who I know you know, Mayor, has shared that the outdoor lifestyle and access is an important factor to get our economy rolling again. And that GoEd and Outdoor Rec and the governor are really trying to, they're going to try to invest in outdoor projects to, you know, and it's going to help with the relocation of businesses to move to Utah. So, but in the same breath, you know, her state has close to $100 million shortfall in sales tax revenue because of COVID. We had a Arches Hotspot Region Coordinating Committee. There was a presentation from the Downtown Business Alliance. A member, Matt Hancock, gave a presentation on the possibilities of downtown side street parking options by using complete street planning, which encompasses multimodal and varied uses for safe mobility for pedestrians, drivers, bicyclists, public transport, and how to use downtown spaces to have it be more multifunctional and not just for parking, but could be used for you know, events and sort of what, you know, other mountain town communities have been able to do with their main street. We could potentially, you know, create streets that would enable us to do that downtown. There was creation of the Hotspot Task Force, which Mike touched on, and Kaylin and Mike are both members of that new task force. They're a working group to work on the side street parking. And then we had a quick 4th of July discussion again with just city staff about logistics, about how to create the space for the celebrations. And then the airport is going to have, on July 7th, there's going to be a ribbon cutting on the new taxiway and apron construction that will be completed. And so that's all I have.
Thank you, Karen. One follow-up. While we can't close Main Street, I've heard interest about a street party on Center Street, separate from the market on Center. But is that something that we would consider, the closure of Center Street for a little block party for the businesses? What's the temperature of this council? Yes, no, Karen?
I don't know. I don't know if I have a dog in the fight.
It's something I could follow up with if the council feels like.
It seems like in the past few years, the owner and the manager of Center Street Square have closed part of that block off for their little block party.
Mm-hmm. Just the parking lot though, but unless the council feels otherwise, I mean, we're looking at closing Center Street up in our municipal area for the market on Center, but maybe we look into a little partying on Center.
Yeah, I mean, maybe see how 4th of July goes and COVID progresses.
Yeah.
People aren't necessarily, I mean, there was a big closure recently down there that was successful in terms of participation. Right. But it was a party.
Yeah, and it seems like as long as we check in with those businesses that are Center Street facing, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I know block parties on the mark, and last year and the year before were great. So, I mean, it has a chance.
Okay. Thanks, Karen, for your reports. Caitlin, you are up.
So I attended those two Arches hotspot meetings that have already been discussed. And I just want to, Chuck and Mark have been engaged on this, as well as Nora. So I'd like to thank them because we're getting more into designing this one possibility. The bigger hotspot group identified 4 possible projects, and we're really digging in on the downtown parking and urban design. As was mentioned, I mean, for UDOT's purposes, they really want us to focus on transportation and congestion reduction, but it's, I think, in the minds of many, it's bigger than this. It also has to do with making the downtown cohesive and consistent and really optimizing for parking as well as other uses, multimodal transportation, and especially pedestrians and the interface between the street and businesses. And I attended the Mountain Town 2030. It was their first of hopefully a number of online engagements, since they have canceled their fall event due to COVID, but are instead putting more energy into these regular online engagement. And it's a big group that was on there, but via chat and connections that are made, it does create many of the networking opportunities and information sharing that happened at the conference. And they're planning to do the next in-person conference in 2021. And there's a lot of different threads in it, so I'll just share one. Pete Muldoon, the mayor of Jackson, shared that he had, with his council, created a climate action department, but then COVID hit, and so that is on hold until revenue recovers, which could be years. So that's sort of a bummer. But he mentioned that maybe change is also becoming normalized with the upheaval due to COVID. He has struggled with shifting transportation to something other than personal vehicles, and recently had success with eliminating parking downtown. And he relayed hearing many of the concerns that we have heard about that, as well as, it sounds like it's very common that when you bring this up, people are naturally attached to their parking. But it was interesting that he and his council were able to navigate that. And then, lots of other communities just shared how they are struggling fiscally to have the resources to implement sustainability and climate related things, but grant money is still coming in, progress is still being made. So good news mixed in with the challenges. That's all I've got.
Thanks, Caitlin, so much. And now we are going to move on to our administrative reports. Joel, take it away. And you are muted.
You want to? I thought you were reading my lips. I'll be brief. Clint is going to give a finance report as well, so I'll be pretty quick in mine. This is the first week that City Hall has reopened. We are open to the public, and is the gym and the Mark. The Mark, I think, though, is doing Arty Farty Kids Camp this week, so the doors may still be locked because of the number of children they have in there and just for safety reasons, but it is open and operating. The MRAC is scheduled to open Friday, and that's looking like that's going to happen. I'll let Clint talk a little bit more about that as well as we move into it. Lions back to answer Ronnie's question. It's kind of a hard one to answer. They do have a grading permit. They are up there moving dirt. They are working under the approval that they received in 2009, which is still vested outside of the lawsuit. You can send questions to either Lisa or Chuck. If they're general questions, they may be able to answer them. If they're more specific, it is a private development and a private project. It's similar to asking us about a hotel being built down on Main. We may be able to answer it. It may be something we have to defer to the developer. So, but definitely you can send those in, and if we can, we will definitely answer them.
Thanks.
Fireworks are coming up. We have the same ordinance in place that we passed last year. When we passed last year, we just made that an ongoing rule that fireworks are only permitted within city limits at Center Street Park. I have heard nothing from anyone to change that. I assume we're operating under that same standard. That's where they will be permitted. It's drier this year than it was last year, and so I don't know why we would want to change that, but we definitely could hold a meeting too if we wanted to. But as of right now, the ordinance that we passed last year was 2019-20, and that's available online on our webpage. And basically, it's the exact same order as last year. So that's it. If there's any questions for me, otherwise I'm going to turn the time over to Clint because he's got quite a bit to go over.
Can you just clarify, Joel? You're talking about personal fireworks, correct?
Absolutely. The normal fireworks that are up on Sand Flats, that's still ongoing. I got an email from Chris about that today. I don't see any issues or any problems with what's going on there. So they'll be firing those off from above town, and you can still see those, but personal fireworks will be allowed in Center Street Park.
Thank
Ronnie.
you.
So last year we had a lot of violations of people firing off really big stuff in the park. So I'm wondering what we can do differently, because it's definitely a concern for the homeowners, but I'm sure also the city and county property nearby. And it also, yeah, I don't know. It's
a great
it can
question.
be very alarming if you're a neighbor and you see that really big stuff going off when you know it's not supposed to, but also when things are dry.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Last year, when people started showing up and congregating and setting up their fireworks, we did have people violating the rules. I was the only one there. I was running around trying to get people to stop. I'm not the most intimidating of individuals. I wasn't being listened to all that much, so I called law enforcement, and about 45 minutes into it, the real men showed up, and after that, we didn't have any violations. So we were taking that into consideration as we start this year off as well.
And a reminder that this year we'll be having a 4th of July event happening. So there will be city staff patrolling and monitoring the perimeter as well.
Yeah, we're probably planning this, but I guess I'll just request some signage on all sides of the park that just reminds people what's okay and what isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely do that. And it was pretty entertaining last year as I was trying to get people to stop. I had some high school kids debating the ordinance with me, and I was impressed, one, that they knew what an ordinance was, and two, that they'd read it. So it was pretty entertaining, actually.
Didn't you have to tell one of them I wrote that?
Yeah, the one kid said to me, "I don't even think you read that." I said, "I wrote it." So, all right, Clint.
Oh, wait, go ahead. Tawny's got a quick question.
It's just quick. I don't know if we did it last year or if it's worth it this year. Can we run the sprinklers on the ballpark so that it's good and saturated so that we minimize whatever we can?
Yeah, we did that last year. This year's a little different. Last year we did it the day of because no one was up there until later in the evening. And so we did them kind of in the middle of the day, and it evaporated off before people got there, at least on the surface, so it wasn't wet. But we'll definitely do it the night before. And we do that at the other park. We do that at Swanee. Fireworks technically are not allowed at Swanee, but they go up there as well. So we tend to overwater things a little bit for the 4th.
Okay.
We're also going to be potentially running the sprinklers for the first 10 minutes of every hour in the afternoon for the kids to play in during the 4th of July celebration. So,
is there an age limit on kid?
you would qualify.
Oh, goody. Okay,
That's
thank you.
in your heart limit.
Okay. Thanks, Joel. Clint, you're up.
I got two presentations, a quick budget update or finance update, and then some MRAC financial update. So I'm going to share my screen. And let's see if I can find what I'm looking for here. Okay, you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So you guys have seen this slide. This is a sales tax that we ended up approving in the budget the last meeting with a $9.5 million of sales tax for this next year. So for a quick update of what has happened, go ahead.
Then will you go back to that first slide right out the gate, right?
Right out of the gate, man. There you go.
I want to be clear to the council and to the communities we're talking about this. What we're talking about tonight is sales and sales taxes. The other franchise, highway, transit, resort, and energy taxes, they're not what we're discussing. So we're discussing the impact to our sales tax and only our sales tax. We are not addressing in this presentation the impact to our transient room tax or our resort community tax. And you can see our resort community tax is our largest income source, and we're still gathering information as to what the impact on those has been, and those will be reduced as well.
Hey, Joel, the resort tax is part of my numbers tonight, but the TRT is not. So,
Go ahead.
So a normal month, so let's say last year, or basically the last 2 years, a normal month for May and June, it was about $860,000 is what we would collect in sales tax. So internally, with everything that happened in COVID, and you guys remember that May's tax is for March actuals, and June's tax collected is for April. We projected an estimated percentage of a normal month for March or May to be 50%, and then when April, when it was a ghost town in Moab, to be 10%. And you can see that $429,000 in May and $85,000 in June. The actuals and those came in actually today for June, were surprisingly 44% for April, for $375,000. I know I'd reported to you guys earlier in the week, or might have been late last week, of 38%. Well, when they actually came in, it was 44, so $375,000. And I think what we can attribute that to is 35 to 40% of all the sales tax in Moab is local based, and it's not tourism. So everyone needs to thank all the local citizens for getting out and hitting the local markets, getting your takeout. I know I got a lot of fajitas to go a few times in April. It seems like the only way you could get out is doing that or going out in the wilderness. But that was the only normal thing we could do is to get takeout. But surprisingly, April was good at 44%. I mean, not good, but good considering. And the difference between what we had projected for May and June and what actually came in was about $450,000 increase. So you can see those two charts there. The orange being what we estimated, and the gray, the actual sales tax receipt. Any questions before I move on?
Yeah. Did you look at where the money was spent? Like the different categories? Like
yeah. Yeah, it's broken up, and I can send that out. Sales was about 50. I mean, the resort was still the biggest contributor. I will say that TRT tax is usually, $50,000 to $60,000, I think, for like May, and it was like, or for June, and it was like $5,000. But highway tax was still 50 to 60%. Yeah, but sales and use tax was probably 30 to 35%. So it was all over the place, but there wasn't anything that was normalized. I can send all the breakout of the last 4 months to you guys as a council if you'd like to see it, though.
That'd be great.
It's pretty interesting. Moving on. So
Is it
you,
also possible to post it on our website where we've
Yep.
got other, awesome.
if I can do that, no problem.
Back one slide.
I think Lisa wanted some of that, so we'll end up posting all this so that the public can see it.
And so, Clint, will you go? Yeah, thank you. So as you're looking at that, it's great news where we were projecting, because we had no idea what we were going to get in April when no one was here, and we predicted 10% and we got 44%. It's great news. It's a big increase. The bad news is we were basically projecting we were going to lose $1.6 million, and we still lost close to $900,000. So while it's great news we didn't lose as much as we thought, it in no way gets us where we need to be, and it's still a problem. And it's we were projecting when this started we would be down about 3.2 million, and with the numbers that are coming in, I'll let Clint talk about that on the next slide.
Yeah, so as we roll into next year's budget, we projected, just under $3.1 million of the last time that I had presented of revenue loss. We've kind of redone that, so you can see we projected July to be at 33%. Well, July is May actuals. May was, I don't know how you guys thought, but May was a lot busier than April was, and April came in at 44%. So that July at 33% you could throw out the door. So in the green here, we have kind of reforecasted, and I think it's pretty conservative. Joel might disagree on it, but I think it's conservative from where the town is right now. And between those two, we still capped it at 85% and at 80% by the end of this year. And between those two, we're still coming up with a shortfall of projected revenue for next year of $2 million instead of $3 million. And also I wanted to put a note in there that we were allocated $470,000 in relief funding from the CARES Act. And the first tier of that we should receive tomorrow, I'm pretty sure. But these are restricted COVID-19 funds. So that's all they can be spent.
Clint, question for you.
Mm-hmm.
As I read the information that came with the CARES Act funding, it was intended to replace extra expenses that a entity spent with COVID, as opposed to a loss of revenue to deal with because it didn't come. So how does that? Apparently, you guys managed to get past that to some extent. So could you clarify how that works?
And I want to answer that if I may.
Okay.
So we got the 470,000, and Mike, you're absolutely correct. That is the restriction on that money. We have to spend that on money we spent towards COVID and COVID-related costs. To date, we're at about $280,000 already in COVID-related costs. So we're getting close to 300,000. We a little over $100,000 going into the future, and we're nowhere near done with this. And there's no guarantee that we're going to get more CARES funding going forward. So, I mean, if we have right now, the cases are going up statewide, as everyone knows. There's talk of a second wave coming in the fall, and we've basically used almost 3/4 of that money that has to be used towards COVID costs for a city up to this point. Hopefully, as we go forward, a lot of the things we've purchased to get to this point, we don't have to repurchase, but there are things that we will. And so the money that is left, we're using towards COVID costs going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Joel, if I may, I'm just curious what sort of COVID costs have come up, because I mean, when looking through the funding, stipulations, I mean, it's like if you were to do testing for your community, is it to cover insurance costs? Is it what is in, I guess, just what is included in that?
All kinds of things. That includes pay for things. We're paying for some things that we weren't doing in the past. Supplies. We had to buy all new types of cleaning supplies. We had to buy fog machines in order to be able to reopen, to be able to go into a bathroom and just kill everything in the bathroom. So we're basically just, the pool, the MRAC, we had to buy those same type of fog machines. We've had to buy hand dispensers to put at all of our facilities. I mean, we've just had all these costs that we would have never had the hours of employees who were reacting to situations, PPE for law enforcement. There was a lot of overtime in the beginning when we were having to cover shifts, when we've had people being tested, when we've had employees out. Like, there's just been a lot of cost associated with preparing for reopening and other things that have, added up over time.
I know that there was an extra cost for the study that was done by the water quality for the COVID. I mean, did you guys submit those fees? And
yeah, anything that's related to COVID, we've submitted. Man hours, we had to buy masks for employees, but literally like man hours of police that are doing things that are related to anything we can do. The extra cleaning that we're paying for. I mean, anything we can charge for COVID that's costing us, we're putting in that and billing for it.
Joel, is the remodel to the treasurer's office, is that covered under that? Can it be covered under those funds?
That actually is a FEMA grant that we have received, and the FEMA grant covers 70% of that, that window and all of that remodel, and then what's left we're going to put out of this fund. So that's okay. For that.
Thank you.
And that includes, we had to put up at the MRAC to reopen, we've had to reorder windows and protections for all of that as well.
So Joel, and it also said in that if we, like as a city, let's say we did grants for businesses and that would have been covered as well. I mean, but does it, but you're capped, correct? Like by your population. Yeah, so that probably would not have worked out to our benefit. Is that correct?
No, where we only received 470,000, we've essentially used 300,000 of it already, and we're only 4 months into this. And we don't know how much longer we're going to go. We're trying to be frugal with how we're spending that last 170,000 as we look into the fall.
Got it. Thank you.
Joel, this is Ronnie. So just to be clear, and I guess this is for you and Clint, but so we know we got that first 157,000, but the remainder is kind of subject to what happens. We're not entirely sure we'll get the rest of it, right?
I have absolutely no clue when the release date is for the remainder.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Just so we go in knowing that, right? Okay.
So right now, if they didn't give us another penny, we're $130,000 in the hole on COVID.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So, I mean, that's kind of the presentation. I got a short little graph showing where we'd estimated, where we reforecasted, and this is kind of where it was a normal year. What I want to kind of iterate is that I don't think we really will know. I think our biggest baseline of knowing where we're at if things kind of keep trending how they are now is where May numbers come in, which is July next month. That's really, I mean, there's a lot of discussion. Are we at 100% of normal? Are we at 70%? I mean, I've heard numbers all over the place. So that's the month that we need to get back to really use as a baseline of where we're at going forward.
And Clint, can you go back one more slide?
Yep.
And as you see at the bottom of this, there's the COVID recovery projected revenue and then the new COVID recovery projected revenue. We were projecting 3.1, 3.2 million initially. We're now at 2 million essentially. We had $1 million in our rainy day fund when we started this before COVID began. So we're half of that. And with the reductions in spending in staff that we've made up to this point, we're about $1 million in savings in that as well. So we're close right now to being even, but that's if these numbers hold and we don't have another orange and we don't have another shutdown, and like we needed to stabilize and for this to stick in order for this to work. Otherwise, we're going to be right back in a situation where, and that uses all of our rainy day fund to break even. Like that's we get to next year and we have no money.
Yeah, I would sure recommend that you don't, with the possibility of another orange coming up. It's kind of scary. You know, we could go through all this again.
That's our biggest fear.
And just to put it out there that our next council meeting, we'll be doing the public hearing for the budget amendments for the end of this fiscal year of 2020.
To finalize our prior year budget.
Just a favor to ask. I know that it's just a public hearing, and so the council is not set to comment on it. But as soon as that those materials are prepared, even though we're going to be publishing, that our agenda on that Thursday, I just ask that if the materials are prepared and ready for the public hearing prior to that, do you mind sharing that with our council?
Not a problem.
Okay. Just to give us a little more time. Thank you so much, Clint.
I've got one more presentation. If that's
Yeah,
okay.
we're on to the MRAC, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys still seeing my screen here or no?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see from beginning. So I know the MRAC has been a kind of a hot topic of getting it back open. I've kind of put some numbers together and done a deep dive. I know I've only been here less than 2 months, but the MRAC has come up a lot with the just the cost of running it. So I want to do a quick presentation so everybody could see of the breakdown of what it has cost to run it in the last since its opening. So first slide here. This is revenue and expense for the MRAC from 2012 through 2019. So this is not this year, since COVID was part of this year, and we're not ended. This year is not over yet. We've got a couple more days. I only did the 8 years. You can see that the orange line there is expense and revenue is the blue. Revenue has increased every year slightly. I mean, up in 2016, it started to tick up about $25,000 to $30,000 a year, up to $413,000 of revenue in 2019. But it cost a little over $1 million to receive that revenue, and the losses have got bigger. We were at a pretty average loss for the first 5 years, or through 2012 through 2016, about $300,000 a year. But the last 3 years, you can see that increase. This is just the breakdown of where those numbers come from. And I will show you some slides that will correlate with these numbers that might be easier to look at. If you want, I can come back to these in one moment. So the red dotted line is total revenue. And you can see the other kind of the bar graphs there. The blue is it's what it costs to run the MRAC. Really, when I started looking at this, usually when I start to deep dive into numbers, I kind of make wagers in my head of, hey, I wonder how much it costs to run this place and what the big drivers are. In my mind, I thought the big driver was going to be utilities. Utilities is about 10% of what it costs to run the MRAC. But the biggest driver is labor. And you can see those blue bar graph there, how it was flat and how it started to really tick up in 2017, 18, and 19. And with that, the other item that ticked up with it, obviously that correlates to labor, is benefits. Everything else is pretty flat. I got another graph that has these same numbers. It's another way to look at it here. As you can see, all the costs are pretty flat for those 8 years, except for the orange line of benefits and the blue line of labor. It's increased. Yes, revenue has increased, but we have never made enough revenue to even cover the cost of labor to run the MRAC. So that's kind of what I wanted to put together. And those numbers correlate to these, and you can see the breakdown of it. The labor, how it's increased from 328 to 335, pretty flat. To 2016, you just really start seeing it build up. And I know there was a lifeguard increase and hourly increase in 16 to 17, but it was also salaries as well. Both of them, there's just a huge increase, pretty much doubled from 15 to 19. Going to where this last year, 2019, you can see what it cost. That $1 million I spoke of, 81% of that $1 million was labor and benefits, 10% utilities. And if I compare that number to where we were at this time, so I ran a snapshot of pre-COVID 2020, where we were comparative to 2019 when we lost $600,000. We were about $13,000 in revenue at the time, and our costs were down roughly $20,000 to $25,000 as well. But when we shut it down in March, between April and June, May and June, we estimated a loss of $150,000 in revenue, and we also spent $100,000 in operational costs for the MRAC itself, and $80,000 of that was in salaries and benefits. So I know we're gonna start. It opens on the 26th, and I think our big concern is that July itself last year we lost $80,000. So it's one of our bigger hitter months of it. Most of the passes are bought earlier in the season. You don't get a ton of revenue in July, but there are a ton of costs between lifeguards, salaries, and everything else. So we are doing our best to put a plan together to open it and to try to get it more in line with expenses and revenue. From there, this is kind of an org chart that I wanted to put on here. I think Carly can come, or Joel can speak to that here in a moment. My question is, where do we go from here? Yeah, we open it on the 26th. We will have it will be limited. It'll be limited opening. Some different things that we've looked at is adjusting the labor rates and hours, which have been done. Adjust open swim hours. There's thought of having the pool open later in the evenings. We could raise fees. We are going to end up doing concessions, and the RAP tax, which Joel can speak to too, if he'd like. So, yeah, questions, concerns between me, Joel, and Carly, I think hopefully we can answer them.
Clint, would you like to go back one slide just so that we could look at that organizational chart?
Okay.
Just real quick.
Clint, you in one of those slides, you have revenue by area, and then costs are broken out by different categories. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, is it possible to align them so that we know the profitability, if you will, of the different parts of the mark?
Yes, I can. And I've got all that data. I did a deep dive, and I've got all of the detailed data for every expense item, all in an Excel spreadsheet, and I can look at it and manipulate it and do a cost per each item as we like. I could do that.
Okay, and it seems like maintenance was relatively flat. Is there deferred maintenance that's being accumulated that we should be planning for as well?
I know there was some capital projects money that was spent, not a ton of it. That might have been part of the maintenance supplies item, but the deferred part of it, I can't answer that one. I don't know.
The answer, Kaylin, is no. We spent a lot of time back in April trying to figure out if it would be cheaper to close the pool and basically mothball it, or if it was, and then bring it back online at a later date, or if it was cheaper to have one or two people remain to keep it operating throughout that time period. In April, when we were figuring all this out, we had no idea what the time frame for a reopen was. And so we were working in windows that we couldn't quite tell, like how long is it going to be mothballed if we mothballed it. We talked to some people who do this for a living, these types of things, and it basically came down to, if you're pushing out for more than a few months, then bringing it back online could be quite expensive. And so we determined that it would be probably cheaper to keep operating the pool even if it was closed than try and bring it back online at a later date and having to make repairs to the systems in order to replace O-rings and gaskets and everything else that would dry out in the meantime while it was closed. And so we don't have any deferred maintenance. We have continued to operate the pool. Even
Joel, I don't know if you muted or you just, your internet went out, but you kind of muddled and then you went silent.
So can you, it must have just been
I can
internet.
hear you now.
I could confine to that.
I can hear him.
I can hear.
Okay, so the short answer is we've continued to operate it. There has been no deferred maintenance costs that have been put off.
Okay, I just wondered if there was things, predictable things that were on the future, even if the MRAC is operational, that we should be accounting for in these projections about moving closer to break even.
Yeah, like wasn't there like the outside siding like
Yes.
falling apart and the inside beams or something?
The cladding on the outside of the building is failing, and there is drywall issues on the inside of the pool area that are failing as well that need fixed. Those have needed fixed since before I got here a year and a half, 2 years ago. So, but those systems continue to fail, and they are a problem. If the cladding on the outside of the building fails, it exposes the interior, and we start having water issues and all sorts of stuff. So that is stuff those are costs that are still there, but at this point, it's a non-option to fix those in the near future.
Hey, Joel and Clint, this is Ronnie. I just had a question. So I know some of you get the same emails we do. I don't know if Clint did, but recently we got 2 emails from gym members who were hoping, at some point we might be able to do a partial opening of the gym. And they seem to have some insight and ideas for doing that cheaply. So can we just make sure to forward those to you so you guys can contact them? Some of them offered to do, some free crunching or assistance, just from their insight, if it was helpful to you guys.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Obviously, when you look at that bar graph that Clint had up there, we're trying to get back to the 2016 level where that revenue and that expenditure are pretty close.
Yeah.
Not on opening the gym. Right now, it's a staffing issue. We have we laid off every single employee at the MRAC. Like we had basically no employees there at one point. And so right now, the limited hours is 1, cost of operation, and 2, we're bringing people back from furlough or being laid off to operate the pool. And so right now, it's a staffing issue and a finance issue. So
yeah, and I'm guessing if people were just looking at the org chart, it's probably in the process of being updated, right? Because obviously, if we're doing a phased opening, we probably have a lifeguard by now. I mean, as opposed to the 0 that's on the chart.
Pull that org chart back up, Clint. You just took it off there.
Sorry.
We have that org chart is current.
Okay.
Well, excuse me, the numbers aren't current.
Gotcha.
Patrick Berry and Stacy Sheets are at the pool.
Yeah.
Started training about 20 lifeguards. Most of them are certified.
Okay.
Recertifying them this week. So there are lifeguards that worked the pool prior that have come back. And so we do have enough lifeguards, and we do have Patrick and Stacy down there to open the pool for the limited time we have at this point. We are posting those positions. A part of what we're doing has been salary cuts, and a lot of the former lifeguards were making $17 or $18 an hour. And as we did as we outreach to other communities and other cities that had pools, we found most pools, like Park City, others were paying lifeguards $8 to $10 an hour. And we were paying double what almost all pools were paying. And so as we've reached out to a lot of people and we've brought that lifeguard pay structure down, we've had some tell us that they're not interested in coming back for $10, $11, $12 an hour. And so we can't afford to continue to pay them $17, $18 an hour. And so we're having to repost, and the 20 that have come back, we're really thankful that they're willing to do that. And the rest we're going to fill with new people, and Stacy will get them certified through the Red Cross. And Stacy's ran the lifeguards and the pool operation for as long as I've been aware. That I've never heard anyone talk about anyone else doing it. So, that's still in Stacy's hands, and she's completely confident, and I don't have any concerns with the safety of the pool whatsoever with Stacy.
Thanks for all that. Thanks.
Joel, I know this is before your time, but so the aquatic center, it was built with, is it mineral lease money? Do we have a history of how this And
Yeah. Yeah, so it was built through a loan through the mineral lease money, and currently the county rec district pays the bond payment on that annually. So they've been paying that cost of this that is approximately the rec district gets around $200,000 a year. And so that's money that this is operation costs that we're not even paying, that's on top of the costs that of operation. And so through this process, for some reason, if those institutions are having financial hardship too, and they're unable to make the bond, that bond is 100% in the city's name. It is under our legal obligation. And if for some reason the special service district was unable to make that payment, we would be obligated to make that payment.
And are they making those payments through mineral lease money?
I don't know. My guess is they're getting TRT money through the county. I don't know how I don't know what the funding source is for the rec district.
It's my understanding lease money, Joel.
It's what's that?
Mineral lease money is what I've heard.
Yeah.
Okay, and then
that's mine too, but I don't know that. I've never.
Okay. And then when you were doing outreach, are there other recreation aquatic centers that are actually in the black, or are they always in the red?
I didn't talk to them about their overarching budget. We were more talking fine details of like how we were trying to save on our costs. I don't think we expect this to ever operate in the black. I don't think that's realistic. It's a pool. They don't make money. But we have to close that gap. As you can see, that $600,000 gap that was in 2019 in Clint's slide, that last year, that's not sustainable. It's just not. We can't afford to do that. And so if we can get back to that 2016, Clint, can you go back to where you were at go back one more? Yeah, that one. You know, we can get back to that 2015, 2014 number, and we get a RAP tax passed. If we start offsetting the pool $300,000 a year off RAP tax that we weren't getting before, and we can get to that 2016 number, it could potentially be in the black. And that's the goal.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, the sustainability outside of COVID, I mean, obviously, you know, this was an issue. This is, I mean, it's a burden, even though it's a community benefit, you know, for the city. And the fact that no matter what we charge, I don't think we could ever we could get to those payments that we would need to offset the cost of running this facility.
That's 100% accurate. And so that's, you know, we showed you the presentation, Clint showed you the presentation right before this. And, you know, I wanted to make the point that we're $2 million in the hole, even with the good news of 44% and the numbers going up. You know, if we used all of our rainy day fund and with the savings we've made up till now, we'd potentially break even, but that's not sustainable either. So we got to get it closer to 2016 numbers.
So thank you, Clint, and thank you, Joel. I see we're just unsharing the screen. Do we have any further discussion? We're still at admin reports. Are there any additional reports, or have we reached the end of the admin report section of our meeting?
That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you so much for that was a lot of information and very helpful for this time as we move forward. Let's see, we are now at section 5, citizens to be heard. Summer, could you please report to us the number of comments that were submitted for citizens to be heard?
Yep, we've received 13 comments from citizens to be heard. They will be posted on the council's webpage on the city's website.
Thank you. And there was just a discussion earlier regarding the direction to staff to follow up with citizens to be heard, comments that may have some questions attached to them. Okay, moving right along, we are at item number 6, presentation 6.1, Moab Police Department maintaining standards beyond community expectations. I believe we have Chief Edge in the Zoom waiting room. If we can bring him on in.
You should be with us momentarily.
Hi, Chief. Looks like you are muted.
Is that better?
Better.
Excellent.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And whenever you're ready, we can get started with your presentation, and then I'm assuming we'll have a Q&A at the conclusion.
Correct.
Thank you.
Haven't done this yet, so I'm going to attempt to share my screen and we'll see if it works.
Okay.
Does that work?
It does. We can see it clearly.
Excellent. Okay, good deal. All right. So tonight we're going to talk about, there's a campaign that's been around for a few years now, actually, that kind of evolved from another campaign several years ago. It's called the What is 8, or the 8 Can't Wait campaign. And it's an 8-point political action campaign to reform police in the United States. It's kind of pitched as being inexpensive and something that can be implemented very quickly. And the ultimate goal of the campaign is to reduce police violence. The 8 that can't wait are displayed on the graphic that you see here. They are banning chokeholds and strangleholds, requiring de-escalation, require warning before shooting, requires exhaust all alternatives before shooting, a duty to intervene, ban shooting from at moving vehicles, require a use of force continuum, and require comprehensive reporting. Before we jump into those, though, I want to say that we contract with a company called Lexipol to deliver our policy. And Lexipol is a company that provides policy throughout public safety, so not just to law enforcement, but to fire, EMS, et cetera. And they have a number of employees who are attorneys, and when they develop policy, they go through a process that includes looking at current industry best practices. They regularly review current federal and state law, changes to those laws, et cetera. So they provide a really comprehensive product. And one of the great things about the policy is they write the, for lack of a better word, they kind of write the generic policy. And then as that rolls out to the agencies who contract with them, we also have the ability to customize those policies, because obviously you're not going to have policies that are kind of a one size fit all. A policy that works for New York may not work for us, simply because, you know, we have 15 officers and New York has 40,000. So you have to take into account the amount of resources that you have, the number of staff that you have, budget, you know, kind of everything that plays into that. So before we implement any policies, we go through and review them as they've come down from Lexipol and decide whether or not they're workable as is, or if we need to make some adjustments to those. So it is a long process to fully integrate the Lexipol policies when you're moving from the old policy lexicon to the new one. That said, we'll go ahead and jump into the 8 can't wait recommendations. The first of which is banning chokeholds and strangleholds. And I want to note that Utah Post doesn't teach this technique. I've been a cop for 14 years. It wasn't something that they taught when I went through. They still don't teach it. There are some agencies in Utah who still have it in their policy. I'm not passing judgment on them. You know, they have their own belief system and their own reasons for including it. There are some agencies who had it and have recently abandoned it. But to the best of my knowledge, at least speaking for the time that I've been here, it's never been in our policy. It's never been something that we train with. We don't utilize it, et cetera. I do want to point out that the 8 Can't Wait campaign is very absolute. So they use words like shall rather than should, which when used in policy, if you use the word shall, you're basically saying that that's the law, that's it. The officer cannot deviate whatsoever from that policy. When you use the word should, it allows the officer, or it allows for some officer discretion following policy, but then having some discretion to act as necessary. So with this, even though, you know, Post doesn't teach it, we don't train it, we don't utilize it. In the time that I've been here, we haven't used it. I think it's important to keep the policy as is, because law enforcement is, like I said, it's not really absolute. So there could be situations when an officer is on the ground fighting for his life, and using a chokehold or something similar might be the absolute only way that he's able to prevent injury to himself or others. So I don't think it's responsible to say that, no, you can never use it, because if you do that, and then the officer does have to use it in a situation where they're you know, in a fight for their life or for the life of someone else, and that's the only tool that they have available to them, you know, I don't think it's a wise decision to take that away from them. Moving on to the second one, it's requiring de-escalation. Our existing policy recommends de-escalation whenever possible. Multiple policies reference de-escalation, including our conducted energy device policy, which is our tasers, civil commitments, civil disputes, and the crisis intervention policy. We are looking at adding a section to our just kind of generic use of force policy that talks about de-escalation. I think you know, this is one of those suggestions that or recommendations made by 8 Can't Wait that I think is a good one that we could look at making some changes to our existing policy. I do want to point out that our officers have used de-escalation multiple times, even just in the last couple of months, and some pretty significant incidents. And, you know, I feel strongly that our officers are proficient in using de-escalation when possible. We've had 2 incidents in which subjects with guns confronted officers, and officers de-escalated the situation and resolved it peacefully. We had one recently with a knife. We had one just a couple weeks ago in which a local gentleman who suffers from mental health issues and drug addiction was threatening females on the sidewalk and involved officers in a foot pursuit. They caught up with him over by the food truck park, and he was surrounded by both MCPD and Grand County Sheriff's Office deputies. And instead of immediately, you know, kind of dogpiling onto him to take him into custody, officers just let him rant and vent and, you know, throw himself on the ground and get back up and whatnot. And when he had worn himself out, at that point, officers took him into custody safely. So, you know, I think our officers do a really good job of using de-escalation. We did have training, that said, we did have de-escalation training scheduled for this spring that we had to cancel because of COVID, but our training coordinator is rescheduling that for late summer or fall. So we will be bringing that back. The third recommendation is to require a warning before shooting. The existing, let's see, just one second. The existing use of force policy states that under such circumstances, a verbal warning should precede the use of deadly force where feasible. I feel that this is sufficient. To say that an officer shall use a verbal warning, I don't think is realistic or even something that should be considered. If you have a situation, and I'll use the situation in Ogden recently with the Ogden officer who was shot and killed responding to a domestic violence call. As they were walking up to the house, the suspect started firing through the door, requiring an officer to use a verbal warning before returning fire in a situation like that. It isn't practical. So, you know, I think the way our policy reads now is a very good one. Duty to intervene. Basically, the gist of this is that if a officer witnesses another officer using excessive force, the officer has a duty to intervene and stop that excessive force and to report it to supervisors. Until this morning, the way our policy read, and the slideshow that you all have is ever so slightly different on this particular slide than the one that you're looking at here, because in the bottom where it says the degree of force permitted, can't see past the thing that shall promptly report these observations to a supervisor. Your presentation says should, because that's how our policy read at the time. It was brought to my attention by Ronnie that perhaps we should change that to shall. I 100% agreed, because I don't think that this is something that an officer should have any discretion on. If you see, and if an officer sees another officer using excessive force, or for that matter, doing anything outside of policy, I think they have to report it. So we have changed that to they shall promptly report those observations to a supervisor. The next recommendation from 8 Can't Wait is to ban shooting at moving vehicles. And again, the recommendation from 8 Can't Wait is an absolute, just to ban it wholesale. I'm not sure that that is the best approach. I think we have a really good existing policy around this, and it's part of our use of force policy. And essentially, it just says that, you know, their shots fired at or from a moving vehicle are rarely effective, that officers should get out of the way of a moving vehicle if possible, and that they should only shoot at a moving vehicle in very limited circumstances. So again, if we say that they can never shoot at moving vehicles, it takes away some of that discretion, and it takes away some of the ability of an officer to maintain public safety. 8 Can't Wait recommends the requirement of a use of force continuum. There aren't, quite a while ago, even before I started in law enforcement, the use of force continuum was essentially a pyramid with the several different layers of use of force. At the very top of the pyramid was lethal force, and at the very bottom was mere officer presence. In between all of that were all the tools that an officer has. And the use of force continuum essentially says that the officer will go through each layer of use of force before getting to lethal force. It really, the reason it's not used so much anymore is because it just isn't realistic. You just, to throw out an example, if an officer makes a traffic stop, someone jumps out of the car with a gun, points it at the officer, according to the use of force continuum, the officer should use verbal first, then resort to what they called soft hands at the time, and then, you know, escalate all the way through to lethal force. That's not realistic. If somebody jumps out of a car and points a gun at an officer, the officer needs to have the capability to defend himself and the public in whatever way is reasonable. So what Utah Post teaches now, and this was something that they adapted from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and it's being taught here as well as several other academies throughout the United States, is something that's similar to a decision wheel that has the officer in the middle with all of the officer's tools in a circle surrounding him. And the officer has the ability to use or select whatever tool is necessary for that particular job. That said, our existing use of force policy does provide guidance stating that the officer shall only use the amount of force that reasonably appears necessary given the facts and circumstances perceived by the officer at the time of the event. So even though the officer has the ability to jump from mere presence to another higher level of force, they're still guided by policy in how they do that. I think this is the last recommendation from 8 Can't Wait is to require comprehensive reporting. They are recommending that officers report each use of force or threatened use of force. In this case, the example they gave is pointing a gun at a citizen. This is already addressed by our current use of force policy. And the use of force policy does state that the department will produce an annual use of force analysis. And that's something that we're working on now. I took over in April, May, something like that last year. Up to that point, we had not completed a use of force analysis, but we are doing that now and will continue to do that going forward every year. Usually, we're going to try to produce that in July as the new fiscal year starts. Some of the things that we've already done at the Moab Police Department, we had implicit bias training in 2016. In both 2018 and 19, our officers participated in mandatory LGBTQ awareness training that was produced in partnership with Seahaven and the Domestic Violence Coalition. We have mandatory annual discrimination and harassment training. We do have a robust body camera program, part of which is a mandatory monthly review by supervisors of at least 2 body cam incidents. So that allows the supervisors to ensure, A, that the equipment is working properly and that it's being used properly. And they're also able to randomly review officers' interactions with the public. Some of those might be a traffic stop. It could be a domestic violence call. It could be, just something as simple as a VIN inspection. But it allows the supervisors to kind of make sure that everything is working properly and that the officers are delivering the highest possible customer service. In the last couple of years, we've worked really hard to develop partnerships with several local community organizations, a couple of which are Seahaven and the Moab Valley Multicultural Center. We're also looking to develop partnerships with other community organizations. We're always eager to develop those relationships and work with organizations so that we can better serve our public. We participate in and host multiple community events every year, allowing our officers to get out into the public in environments where the officers haven't been called to a scene, where there's something wrong. You're kind of being called there at least the very bad part of someone's day, whereas during these events it's a much more open and kind of collaborative environment where people can come up and talk to officers as human beings and ask questions about what we do. And kids can check out our gear, and it's a really positive thing that we've been doing for at least 2 years, maybe 3 or 4 years, and that our officers really enjoy. We have a comprehensive citizen complaint system that allows citizens to file complaints online, in person, via telephone, basically whatever works for them. And then all complaints are tracked annually in a spreadsheet, including the resolution of the complaints. And then we do regularly review our policies, including use of force. As I mentioned before, Lexipol reviews those policies on an annual basis, sometimes even more often than that. Anytime there's any kind of federal or state legislation, any kind of significant movement, they start reviewing policies. They are currently reviewing policies based on the 8 Can't Wait recommendations. I don't know when they anticipate finalizing any revisions to policies on that. I just got the email from them, I think it was last week, but they are reviewing policies based on those recommendations. So that's some of the things that we have done. that's all great, but we're always looking to improve. We can and will do more. So the de-escalation training that we had scheduled for the spring was canceled due to COVID, but we are rescheduling it for late summer, early fall. That'll be a mandatory training for all officers. We are going to, the last time we did implicit bias training was in 2016. We are going to make that and de-escalation training mandatory annually for all police and code enforcement officers. So our training coordinator last week was tasked with finding a program that we could bring to Moab to ensure that all of our officers get that training. We'll continue to regularly review policies, including use of force, and implement, we're going to be implementing a community review panel for the use of force policy and perhaps other policies. What we're looking to do with that is to partner with some of the local community organizations to conduct these policy reviews and look for suggestions from them that we may implement into our current policies. We are going to utilize scenario-based training to develop use of force, what's called in law enforcement shoot, no shoot scenarios. And what those are essentially scenario-based training using situations that officers commonly respond to. Some of them may require force to be used, some of them may not. And so what that kind of training does is help to solidify in an officer's mind, what types of situations require force and what types don't. We'll continue to engage in with community members at events throughout the year. COVID has kind of put a halt on that. We had a couple of events scheduled that we had to cancel, and we're very eager to get back to meeting with members of the community and engaging in those conversations. We'll continue to maintain current relationships with community organizations and look for opportunities to create new relationships. And we will maintain strict hiring practices that will ensure employment of the highest quality employees. And as not the standards, but the hiring practices within our industry evolve, we will evolve with them. That's the presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Brett, it would be helpful if you unshared your screen so that we can just see the grid of everybody's faces. Thank you so much.
That works.
Thank you for that presentation.
You're welcome.
Council, questions? Tawny?
Yeah, thank you, Brett. On the training that you've done, you indicated that you did implicit bias training in 2016. Was that the training with Dr. Sam when she came here?
I don't remember the trainer's name, but I think so, yes.
Okay. Okay. It was good training, but I think it bears repeating and updating. And this is just kind of on a personal note as far as training goes, the mandatory annual discrimination harassment training. Is that what's done through the trust?
Yes.
Yeah. I've sat through that training for 12 years. It has not changed one iota in 12 years. In my other position, I don't feel like I'm in a situation where I can request that the trust update that training or do just make it more relevant to current events. I'm just wondering, as a council, do you think it would behoove us to ask the trust to update that training? Because it kind of makes you roll your eyes and say, here we go again, we've done this again. We know we don't sexually harass our coworkers, but it just doesn't deal with the real hardline issues. So, and I have a couple of others. Oh, I have a couple of others that I can.
Was that a question for the council? Like, do we want to write a letter to the trust asking for an update?
Yeah, it was kind of a question to the council. Do we feel like it's worth asking the trust to update their training so it's more relevant? And we can discuss that
sure
at a later time too.
Well,
I've got a
let's,
few
we don't
more-
have to even discuss it. Let's put a draft letter together. Is that something that you'd be willing to draft or?
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
do that.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got a few more that I can email to you, Brett. They're not really, they take a little bit more time than we have. I do have one question as the grandmother of an autistic young man who looks like a man, not like a little boy. He doesn't know what a police officer is. If somebody told him to stop or to wait, he would merely react. He would run out of fear. It wouldn't be out of defiance. Is there any sort of a wristband, a necklace, anything that is in law enforcement's tools to identify these folks so that they can wear them in public and officers will know that they're dealing with a neurotypical person?
Not to my knowledge, but I think it's something that would be interesting to look into.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have for now.
Any other questions for the council? Karen?
Chief, first off, thank you so much for putting this together, and thank you for signing the proclamation with the mayor. I know that was a heavy one, and it's much appreciated because I really do feel like you and your team protect and serve our community in the best way possible. So just thank you from the get. And then also, like, your de-escalation training, is this the first time that you guys are going through this? Or have you had this training before?
Through de-escalation training?
Yes.
This will be, all officers receive de-escalation training in the academy, but to my knowledge, it's the first time that we've done it here at the police department.
Gotcha. And I'm just curious because it feels like oftentimes, when you read the police beat, like most of your, I'm not going to say that, but it appears that a lot of the calls that have to do with mental illness, and I'm just curious, how much are you and your officers trained in identifying mental illness and getting people to the right sources for help?
It's a good question. We have had training. Without looking at a training log, I can't tell you when it was, but we have had training that teaches officers how to identify and deal with folks who are experiencing some type of mental health crisis, but we haven't had any specific de-escalation training. It's certainly something that we're interested in. We tried last year to get a couple officers through the crisis intervention training, team training. We weren't able to do that. It's a 40-hour training. It's 5 days long. So it requires officers to be out for that period of time. And, being small agency and at the time understaffed, there just wasn't any way to do it. We are currently working with the police academy out of Price on the possibility of bringing a CIT academy to Moab that would not only be attended by some of our officers, but officers regionally. So the invitation would go out to all of Southeast Utah. And then those officers who attend would go through the full 40-hour training and be certified as CIT officers. Hopefully we can get that here, but we're working on it.
Okay, thank you. And let us know if there's something that you need from us to make that happen. It just seems like, more and more, we're dealing with mental health issues more than, anything else with our calls. So, just let Joel know or let us know or whatever needs to happen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mike?
Yeah, Chief, once again, I thank you as well. You guys are doing a difficult job, both you and your officers out on the street, and I don't pretend to know what you're all up against trying to make life death decisions on the fly. But I'm curious to know how you feel about qualified immunity. It's a broad subject. One camp, of course, has it that it's necessary for protection of police officers. Another camp has it that it just invites abuse by police officers. So if the subject could be improved, how would you do it, and how do you and your officers feel about that topic?
I don't know how the subject could be improved, but I can tell you that removing qualified immunity, not only I, but I think every chief in the state of Utah would agree with me. Removing qualified immunity would have a drastic negative impact on law enforcement. I've already talked to officers here who have said that if qualified immunity went away, that they would leave. Not just here, they would leave law enforcement. I probably would myself. So we feel very strongly about it, and it's I don't feel that it's a quote unquote protection that enables officers to use excessive force, or that emboldens them to use excessive force or to do things that are, in violation of policy. I think it's a necessary protection, and something that that is just critical to public safety and to maintaining officers and good employees.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Ronnie? Oh, you're muted, Ronnie. You're muted.
The voices in my head I'm talking to. So I just had a few questions from residents, and these might require longer answers, but just to kind of throw these out there. So some of them sent me recommendations of people who might be good trainers, for example, transformative alliances, and I didn't notice it. Should I just gather all that information and pass it on, say, to you, Chief, and to you, Joel? Because maybe it's, it's good for our other staff as well. They sounded like a good resource. And then I got a question from a resident about whether we would be able to share our de-escalation training and implicit bias training materials with the public.
I think that depends on who provides the training. Some of it's
gotcha.
Some of it's copyrighted, and you're not allowed to distribute it outside of those who attend the training. But
gotcha.
If it is not, and they allow it, absolutely would be more than happy to post it on the website.
Can you foresee, or do you know if other departments sometimes let other members of the public or the press participate in the trainings? I don't know if there's a cost associated. So if they happen to cover their own cost, or are there reasons you wouldn't want to do that?
I'd have to give it some thought. My initial reaction would be, I see no reason why they couldn't. It's not quote unquote law enforcement sensitive. We're not discussing tactics that if the general public knew, could endanger law enforcement or anything like that. So I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be possible.
Okay, thanks. And then some people expressed an interest in just getting more involved in offering their feedback. And I know you have the panel started and some groups in mind that you're thinking of working with. And so if we or others have suggestions of groups, while we were sitting here, I was thinking of Pride and Black Lives Matter, but or I know there's some individuals who are really passionate about this. Could they contact you and express an interest? I don't know how that's all going to eventually come together and what it's going to look like, but is that the best thing for them to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say though that, just in the interest of efficiency, we can't have the community board be too large. If you end up with, I think, more than probably 7 or 8 individuals on the board, it's not going to be productive. So, we want to have that group represent the community well, but it just can't be too large, or it's not efficient. It's not productive.
Okay, no, thanks. That's helpful.
I would absolutely like to hear from individuals or community members who have suggestions of who we should consider for the board.
Okay, cool. And then I wanted to clarify, and maybe you or someone else knows, but I've been trying to follow the stories in the Salt Lake Tribune on what the governor is and isn't doing related to this and health things and other things. And I got a little bit confused. I thought I heard him say last week that he was going to direct, and I'm going to forget the positions, but direct folks to ban chokeholds and sorry, I'm going to lose my wording here. At least for all state law enforcement, and then have posts do that, and then recommend that other law enforcement in the state, look at their policies. So are you clear at this point if there is a state ban on them coming down from the governor, or does anyone know?
My understanding is that the governor has put in, I don't know if you call it policy, but effectively eliminating the ability to use a knee on the neck, which I didn't even know that was a thing. But apparently it is something that's trained elsewhere, but the governor has made that something that we can't legally do here. And from what I understand, they're looking at adding some additional chokehold restrictions, but yeah, that one is absolutely out.
Okay.
And the League of Cities and Towns, remember, Ronnie, I reported that the league as a board, and then the LPC signed on to support that legislation.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to get clear, since 8 Can't Wait talks about a ban, and I wasn't clear if the state of Utah effectively had a ban at this point or not. Okay, cool. And I think my last question is just, we had some email from residents who did ask specifically about some of our language, the should and the shall, and the recommend and the require, and you definitely walked us through some of the problems that you see with that. But can you or someone else in the meeting now recommend a way to kind of move that dialogue forward? I didn't know if because a lot of the points that you make sense, and I'm sure they have a lot of points where they think there's some ground to meet, and so I can wait for this, but I'm just thinking if there's anything we can do to help bring you guys together to find some place in the middle, or at least better understanding of where each perspective is coming from. I'll just take any advice from anyone.
It's a good question, and I don't know that I have the answer right now.
Yeah, okay. Yep, thank you. I think that was all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other council questions for the chief? Chief, thank you for your presentation tonight. Thank you for being engaged with community members. Thanks for engaging with the protest organizers. Thanks for signing a very forward-thinking proclamation with me. Thanks for being a really good, solid leader.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thanks for all you do for the city.
Thank you.
All right, you can go. Enjoy the rest of your night. We're going to just plug away at this agenda here.
All right. Good luck to everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, council, we're going to move forward here to section 7, old business, 7.1, proposed ordinance 2020-8, an ordinance of the City Council of Moab annexing the Lionsback Holdings LLC property at 938 and 940 South Highway 191 to the City of Moab, and assigning the zone of C4 general commercial to the parcel. Briefing and possible action. Nora informed me that she had just a small reminder of what we're deliberating and voting on tonight. So Nora, please take it away.
Okay, good evening. I'm going to share my screen. I just have a couple slides to show. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so we talked about this 2 weeks ago and held a public hearing, and there was no public input. But tonight it is scheduled for action. So I thought I'd just go over a couple things briefly and address some of the questions that came up. So I prepared this map, which shows the county and the city zoning. These are the two parcels in question. This is parcel and this parcel. The county zoning of general business is on the front portion of the parcel and entirely on this one. And then county rural residential. In the city, this is the city boundary, this red line. In the city, it's adjacent, almost adjacent to or adjoining the R2 and then the existing C4 or our sort of general commercial zone, which is what's being proposed for this site. So that's a little bit better map. That's a compilation of the two. Does that work for you, Ronnie? Do you understand?
Yeah, no, thanks. That was great. I was just having some trouble before. Yeah, with some edges of it.
Yeah, I understand. I apologize. I didn't do it before, but anyway, so that should be helpful. This is just a closer look to kind of look at the parcel and then this parcel as well. This is the plat itself. So this is required by state law, and this is the legal description and the area that would be annexed. So there are a number of steps that are required for annexation. We talked about those a couple of weeks ago, and I won't really go over it, but I can tell you that there was a pre-annexation agreement that was agreed to in January 28, 2020, between the City Council and the applicant. And that pre-annexation agreement was supported by Grand County. There's actually a letter and an email to that effect. So I wanted to remind you all of that. And they are pleased that we are kind of honoring their determination that this was a vested project under prior to the moratorium, because so much apparently there had been a lot of reliance on existing zoning and communications. And so just to make that clear, that Grand County supports us in this endeavor and supports the pre-annexation agreement the way it is written. And then there are the pre-annexation agreements talks about some specific project standards. And then these are the annexation criteria that you are required to make in order to approve the annexation. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Nora. That's very helpful to just summarize what we're voting on here tonight. And we have been discussing this quite a bit. Can we go ahead and unshare your screen just so that we can see each other for this deliberation and action? Again, thank you for that presentation. I think this council is going to have complicated annexations in front of us, and I personally don't see this one to be all that complicated. So discussion among the council.
Mayor, I just wanted to let you know that I do have the applicant in the waiting room if there are questions for him.
Thank you so much. I entertain discussion or a motion.
I will move, this is Mike, if I may. I move to approve ordinance 2020-08, an ordinance of the City Council of Moab annexing the Lionsback Holdings LLC property located at 938 and 940 South Highway 191, otherwise known as Main Street, to the City of Moab and assigning the zone of C4 general commercial to this part.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. Discussion? Seeing none, I will call for a roll call vote. Mike.
Aye.
Karen.
Sorry. Aye.
Kaylin.
Aye.
Tawny.
Aye.
Ronnie.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Next item on our agenda, 7.2, discussion of Walnut Lane priorities and discussion. This is just discussion for this evening, no action. I believe we have Caitlin and some of the partners with us to review the project. Caitlin, welcome. Dan, welcome.
Hi. Thanks. So I'm gonna kind of just outline really briefly how we have set this up. I brought Courtney Kaiser with Architectural Squared and a few members of her team, including Ann Christensen from DHM Design, Dan McCann with Architecture to Look Like. Just thumbs up.
I don't know if it's me or Caitlin. Caitlin,
I think she either froze or garbled.
you're breaking up, Caitlin.
I just got a notification that my internet connection is unstable. Let me try and let me try that again. So I have Courtney Kaiser with Architectural Squared and Dan McCann with Architectural Squared and Ann Christensen from DHM Design here representing our Architectural Squared side of our Walnut Lane team. And so just really briefly, I sent you guys all an email with Google spreadsheet. That is the live and active version of the PDF that I sent you to do the prioritization exercise. And so I'm going to have Courtney give a presentation, but as Courtney's giving a presentation about going a little bit more in depth about our team's priorities for this project, I would encourage you all to kind of consider that spreadsheet, and then that will be the basis of our discussion afterwards. So I will turn the time over to Courtney.
Courtney, you are muted. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
There we go. Hi, everybody. I am going to share my screen. We have a little presentation to share with you. Give me just a sec. Alrighty. Great. So our goal this evening is to get some information from you all on your priorities. To date, this is the information that we have on the project, and we've also been talking with Caitlin and her team at the city pretty extensively. But we realized that the main set of priorities we really need your input on. So our goal is to take any information we get from you tonight and through the spreadsheet that Caitlin's put together for you, and turn that into the most efficient use of the site and the most efficient building that we possibly can. And so these are the goals that we're looking for input on, primarily which code standard we want to use, which sustainability methods are most important to you, and then figuring out the balance of density, parking, and amenities. And then finally, we'll just speak a little bit about our steps forward towards community input and coming up with a financial budget. So I'm going to hand it over to Dan to talk a little bit about sustainability.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me? All right.
Yes.
So real quickly, we're just looking through some of the key elements of sustainable development. And we're obviously not limited to what we have listed on the screen. So three really important aspects in this development that we are considering are the environmental, social, and the economic aspects, and to bring that all together to make this whole development as sustainable as possible. So in the buildings, there's a lot that we can do for sustainability. For the site, we really would like to optimize the orientation for passive solar and shading, and for solar PV. Building envelopes, reaching the 2018 IECC code for the thermal envelope, and efficiency. So the structure, there's lots of different options in our framing methods and materials that we could potentially use. Our HVAC systems, there's lots of options in that, some being the heat source pump. Our energy sources, maybe going all electric and considering the use of offsetting that cost with solar PV and eliminating the use of fossil fuels along with that. And then materials, getting into the low VOC materials to improve indoor air quality and quality of life of the residents living in these structures. In the landscape, there's definitely opportunities to manage our stormwater and to maximize that stormwater for our landscape and for water use in that landscape. In the buildings, we can use water efficient fixtures and also like drip irrigation, rainwater harvesting, and the potential for gray water costs to offset, or gray water systems to offset costs of landscape watering as well. And then also our plant selection, obviously, keeping it in the native and pollinator attractors, drought tolerant and climate adapted landscaping. So some of the things that we would definitely like to look into prior to prioritization of all of this is the low-hanging fruit. This is definitely some things that we would like to do.
Is that my connection, or is Dan breaking up?
Sounds fine to me.
Okay.
So low cost and high return, these are the things that we would definitely like to focus on and achieve. So the daylighting, passive solar, minimum code requirements, natural ventilation, building orientation for the passive solar elements, energy efficient lighting, and efficient water fixtures. These are all things that are very attainable, I think, in the scope of this project. The following slides are things that we're going to need to really consider the trade-offs for. So here we got solar PV, pros and cons. We could get to a net zero structure for all of these units, or a lot of them. The graphs are just showing some different options on your returns and costs for solar PV. And the approximate costs in Utah are about $9,000 for a 4 kilowatt system, which is probably close to what a single residence would need, meeting the IECC 2018 code requirements. So gray water, this is another thing that we definitely would like to consider within this. And you can see, it's going to cost a little bit more to get these into these units. And another con of that is, how are we going to be able to get everybody on board to using biodegradable soaps and not using bleach while these gray water systems are turned on? Some really great, yep, that's fine. We'll just keep rolling through. Low VOC materials, this is really important in the indoor air quality and the health of people living in the structures. But yeah, it comes with a price. You can see the non-VOC is close to 50% more per gallon of paint when it comes to doing this. So how important is the air quality of the people living in these buildings is something that we need to consider. Ventilation, mechanical ventilation, specifically when we start to build in really tight building envelopes and meeting these code requirements, it's recommended that we have mechanical ventilation if we have less than 3.5 air changes per hour. And the 2018 is going to require basically that at a minimum. So mechanical ventilation is definitely something that we'll want to be considering in our this project. Energy Star appliances, they're going to have a higher upfront cost, but you can see in the lifespan of these products, there can be significant savings on the right-hand side of the graph there. Kind of shows that. And then sustainability and adapted climate adapted landscaping. These two graphs here are from a study that was done in Santa Monica, California, between 2004 and 2011 on basically 2,000 square foot lawn. And this really kind of breaks down the advantages of having native and climate adapted landscapes, especially out here in the arid West. So this is something we want to consider as well in our priorities. And then last here, we've got certifications. There's all sorts of green certifications and sustainability certifications that we can look into. And how important are these certifications? We have the Living Building Challenge, the potential to do a living building community, or just to reach certain petals of the LBC certification. We've got LEED and all the different levels of LEED. We could shoot for a HERS rating and scores of under 50 and go for net zero or zero energy buildings. The graph on the right, real quick, just kind of breaks down the approximate cost of a project that was built in Washington, D.C. It's about 350,000 square feet, new apartment building. And the original cost of this was estimated to be about, let me see where in my notes, I had that written down. About $172 a square foot. And you can see down below when we start to look into these LEED and the net zero or zero energy buildings and the Living Building Challenge, how the cost per square foot kind of increases in this particular study in comparison. And you can kind of see the full study if you want to take a look at it. It's in the link below on the bottom of the page there. So that kind of wraps up my side of the sustainability stuff and all the things that we need to consider and where our priorities are going to lie in that.
Thank you so much, Dan. What's next?
So the next thing we need to discuss is how we want to go about achieving density. And the biggest question that we have run into is whether we want to be using the R4 zoning designation or the PAD. And the big, as you all know, the big benefit of the PAD is the lack of a max density. However, also, as you know, there are a lot of stipulations that go along with that. So this is just a comparison of the two. And I think if it were a perfect world, as designers, we would do some sort of mix of the two. The density, the lack of density requirements on the PAD, it gives us flexibility from a financial standpoint. However, the parking requirements from the R4 are a 5 to 10% smaller amount than the PAD, which is, we're definitely going to be tight on this side, on this site with providing max density in comparison with parking.
Do you not see, not to interrupt, but do you not see a benefit of the minimum unit size for this development?
So the way that the R4 is written, this actually isn't something that we have to meet. It's just for the ground floor units. And I actually don't think that it's that the types of units that we're proposing, we get very much benefit from this 275 square foot, because this is only for efficiency units that this becomes helpful. And the number of efficiency units that we'll be proposing on site is a pretty small number. And of course, all of these numbers play into the pad as well, which I think we're fully aware that these are all the major goals of this project, is meeting these affordability elements. However, without having these things written, we do have a little more flexibility on how to provide those and make sure that the project breaks even. So this just goes back to the site plan that you all have already seen from our original RFP. And as we know, this is single family neighborhood, and over here to the east is single family neighborhood. So in whatever site plan we end up proposing, our density strategy will be to feather the height and scale of the buildings into those neighborhoods. And we are looking at a variety of different typologies. We think duplexes and townhomes and apartments are going to end up being the mix that we propose on site. And we do want your input on how you think this development should end up being. Should it be all apartments? Or should it be a lot of duplexes? What does the council feel is the best mix of typologies on this site? This is a diagram that just explains the benefits of more dense units like apartments. Essentially, the fewer units you have in a structure, the more expensive it's going to be per square foot. So if we did go with an all apartment building scheme, it's going to be the most financially efficient. But we do believe that some mix of these typologies will be the most diverse project and meet a variety of different user needs. We did also want to just discuss height of buildings, not that we need to do this on this site, but just generally have the discussion that increased height means increased cost per square footage efficiencies and increase for amenities on the ground level. This is another diagram that explains that same thing. So if we're trying to do the entire site in 2-story buildings, we're just going to end up with less area for parking and amenities. And this also kind of describes the same type of pie diagram that Caitlin's having you fill out on your priorities. Which of these things are the most important? And maybe it is that they're all equally important. But some place we have to give. If the open space is important to us, that means smaller buildings or less parking. We are thinking that some of the things that we want to incorporate into the parking design are to make it as efficient as possible. I know we all hate seeing big parking lots, but at the end of the day, that can be the most efficient way to provide the parking required. We do think that having some parking spaces covered is a good opportunity to provide PV locations. It also could be an opportunity to provide some paid parking locations to help with cash flow. And we definitely are going to find some space on site for covered bike parking. And we think a storage unit for each unit would be great, whether or not we use the pad. It is a requirement under the pad, but even if we were to go with R4, I think that's something we think is important. And I'm going to hand it over to Anne to talk a little more about the amenities and landscape.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Great. So with this kind of small campus type setting with a variety of different types of buildings that Courtney described, it creates a great opportunity to provide amenities for the community members within that really support healthy living and just meet basic needs of life. And so some of the things that we see as really important within this project, but we would want to hear your input and also coordinate this with our public input process. But we see a lot of interest in similar apartment type complex and housing developments with having some small garden plots that can be rented out every season, and then just playgrounds and tot lots for kids. There's all kinds of outdoor sort of health type features. On the bottom right is a reflexology path. It doesn't take much space, but it's really a way for people to get outside and connect with nature and do some things that are sort of enhancing, and then just gathering space and being kid friendly. See, can you advance to the next slide, please? Yeah, and then also just having some opportunities within the project for some other community activities, both indoors and outdoors, community space for a small fitness center, activities outside, like we're showing bocce ball. It can be different kind of game areas and grilling. And within the development, it also has an opportunity to design it in a way to add a little more life on Walnut Lane itself and face that with something like a coffee shop or just shared kind of space for that community. And then other sort of outdoor gathering places. And none of these are really high cost items too, like the fireplaces and patios and covered bike parkings, but they add a lot to the quality of life for the citizens there. Okay, next slide, thanks. And then as we get farther along in our study, our first step is to really make sure that we have a mix that of types of buildings and a site plan layout that we get this group's input, and we vet that really well amongst our team, and also understand the financial balance of that and how it's going to work. And then when we get to that point, then launching a more comprehensive public process. And in a project like this is something that Moab is very proud of being able to provide and meet that need for affordable and attainable housing that complements the surrounding neighborhood. And so our public process will be a lot of fun, and we want to incorporate techniques that bring people in and get really meaningful participation and buy-in and interest from folks. And the way that we've done that in the past is by having more interactive and engaging activities, making it fun, having food, coming up with some creative ways to do that, going to where the community already meets. We try to get out of sort of the usual pattern of evening meetings that are hard for a lot of people to attend that have children or other obligations. And so by coming to more activities and meeting one-on-one with folks, we want to get real input and listen and have some of those plan ideas implemented. So if there's some ownership, and by just active listening, we can bring in these type of amenities that are really customized to be unique to that community's need. Okay, next slide. And just wanted to highlight another sort of opportunity of this project too, is that that location is really central within the community and has the potential for a lot of connections. And one of the things that can really enhance the quality of life here is just improving the overall walkability. From this site, you can get very easily to the hospital, to Main Street, to the center of town, to the schools, all the different primary destinations. And so we want to improve the walkway system both internally and linking outside of the site. And then also, as Courtney mentioned, provide some landscape buffers to transitioning to the different types of housing around it, and just create a really green and nice setting for that housing. And that's it on those. And then also just.
Can I just interrupt you 1 second? Just
Yes.
because it's 9:50 and I just wanted you to be aware that we've been meeting here since 6 p.m. And so I don't want to rush your presentation, but now we're quite into quite a lot of time here. So I don't want you to lose us. And I'm just so like jumping jacks in my head over this project. But I do want to just ask that, like, hopefully we'll be able to wrap up soon.
And honestly, everything else that we have in here is just, we essentially want y'all's input. So looking for any guidance we can get from you all.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, that was kind of the end of the presentation. And I appreciate you guys going into more detail. I think that the goal of sharing that presentation was, one, for you as a council to see, to hear, and to meet some of the people on our team. that we've been meeting with about this project, and to see some of their goals that they brought to both the interview process and that have been bringing weekly. So yeah, I think this is a great time. I don't know, it'd be easier for me to share my screen to actually look at the spreadsheet, or if it would be easier to just open it up to council to ask questions. And, as I said in my email earlier, but I would, appreciate if you guys wanted to fill out that spreadsheet now, but also if you want to take time to think about that and to get back to us about that within the next couple of days, that would be great as well. So
I guess that's what I would like, because it's 9:50, and because I'm sure this council would like to have some time to go over the thoughts that. So the ask of this council is that we look at the two main areas, and that you need to hear ranking from us, and then we'll open the spreadsheet and we'll put our rankings on that spreadsheet, and then you want to have us respond to that by when?
Oh,
go ahead, Mike.
Can
Just
you
to answer that really quickly. Sorry, before you go, Mike, just to answer the mayor's question, I would ideally like to have them by the end of the day on Thursday. Ideally, I'd like to have them done earlier on Thursday, but latest end of the day on Thursday.
okay. Well, that's great. Hey, listen, before you guys go, could I ask a couple of questions about who pays for what? Because who's got the incentive to take care of lawns, or who's paying the bills on utilities and so forth, is an important part of this. So for example, do you guys anticipate there'll be a homeowners association who are going to contract out a landscaping company to take care of the lawns and stuff? Or will each individual resident be responsible for his own lawn care? And who buys the expensive refrigerators? Who buys the heaters and the air conditioning, so you could compute life cycle costs? Because renters may want to do one thing, and somebody who's going to be living there permanently may want to do something else.
Thank
That would
you
help
for that
me.
question, Mike. Joel, can you answer that?
In the rental units, that cost will be absorbed by the city. We'll be making all that rentals. If the properties are owned, it gets a lot more difficult, but the majority of this being rental, that'll fall to the city.
Okay, well, thank you, Joel. The reason I ask is this has got nothing to do with the fact this is low income housing. These guys are working hard at jobs. It's got to do with the fact that renters typically don't get very good care of their lawn because they're busy doing something else. And that might influence where my priorities lie or how to fund different things. That's why I ask.
The cost of maintaining the facility would have to be a part of penciling out how much we charge for rent and how to make it all work, is to be able to fund how to maintain it as well.
Okay. The only feedback I can give you.
Oh.
I'll stop.
Oh. Kalen's had his hand up for just a while.
Yeah. So process-wise, it seems like there is some more detailed feedback that I would like to give, and I suspect the other council members were, but out of respect for the hour, I'm wondering, beyond this very high level ranking of 3 factors, is there a process for the design team and city staff to receive other input, or is there going to be a session like this earlier in another meeting, or how is this going to work going forward?
Yeah, this is definitely, you guys have been involved with this conversation since the very beginning, and that's our goal, is to continue that. But I think that we as a team wanted to bring this conversation to you before we started bringing you site plans, because we're getting to the point where we're starting to make some decisions with that, we want to have a high level of the council and the city's goals for this project before we start bringing them to you, so that we have a list of priorities that you can use as a lens to start viewing these site plans. So this is definitely not the last conversation. I mean, I guess it's up to you. And we as a team would really like to have these done this week, which is why I wanted to have this discussion.
So are you going to bring a list of programmatic priorities back to us before you begin design?
That was our goal tonight, was to have a list of priorities, list of programmatic things that the council wanted to see so that we could really start getting into the weeds with the site plan as a team, so that we could have products that we want you to make high level decisions on. Yeah, so we can continue this conversation with some high level programmatic conversations, but I think that was one of our goals tonight.
And then shall we put you on the agenda for our next council meeting to report back, and if the design is moving forward, should we have a placeholder on our agenda each meeting for a report from your team? Is that something you guys would be able to deliver? Like a 10-minute report back?
I think so. I mean, if that's the desire of the council, we can, I mean, if not every meeting, certainly at least once a month as we have pertinent updates. I think we could definitely do that.
Okay. Council, would you like that? Okay. Tawny?
Can we get a copy of your presentation? Just so we have it to refer to?
Yes, I will email that to you after I get off this call.
Thank you.
Ronnie?
This may be just be me, and I understand the time constraint. We're probably all tired, so I don't know that we have brain power anyway. But I kind of feel like I'm going to be sitting there Thursday grasping at straws, because I know some of the questions we asked you, Caitlin, we were hoping to discuss tonight. Like I had that question of, what's going to give us the best deal over time in terms of operations and maintenance. Or I was kind of curious if there had been any feedback from residents and what they might be looking for. I'd just be curious from the team, like, if you guys were sitting in my chair and you could design this and prioritize, how would you do it and why? Because that would just really make me feel better informed as I choose these three. So I'm just wondering, Caitlin, like over the next 2 days, is it possible to have maybe a Google shared document or something where I can ask some of those questions? And then if you have any ideas for me to consider, that way other council members could read them and benefit from them. Again, I mean, it might just be me, so maybe that's not necessary and maybe I should just contact you. But I feel a little bit lost still, because I kind of thought we were going to have, time to dig into that and some of the other questions other council had raised.
I agree with Ronnie and think that having some format for this, whether it's sometimes for big projects like this or other issues like the budget, we have separate workshops outside of council meetings.
Well, we could certainly schedule a workshop depending on your team's availability and the scope of the contract. Karen, you had a comment?
I was just going to ask if we could do, it seems like there's so much information and each department, has really great information. I would take everything that Anne presented and say, I want it all, but I don't know how feasible that is. And so it is, for us to get in the weeds a little bit, I think will be important, so that, there's, again, I would just say I would love to have a workshop as well.
Yeah. And I agree with the shared document too, but it seems like then we run into issues about open meetings.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be great. I would love to, have an hour to talk about this. I'm wondering, I think it would be the preference of our team to not have to wait, 2 to 3 weeks to talk through some of these, because we want to keep moving forward with, creating some site plans for you to view and working on the pro forma and all that kind of stuff.
So Caitlin, we can actually look at like Thursday or Friday this week.
Okay.
Schedule a workshop, and that's plenty of time to notice. and the, the council members that can attend will. And there'll, it'll be a noticed council meeting, so there'll be a recording. And then we'll still hopefully hit your target of having the priorities set by the council of these high level questions by the end of this week. What do you guys think about that?
Thursday, that's great.
Thursday, what time Thursday works for folks? And is it in the scope of our contract to be able to have an hour meeting like this to workshop? Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it's in the contract to have, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3, but to have at least a couple of meetings with council to talk through some of this.
Well, because I mean, this is like the most important engagement step with the council for sure. And just hearing like we could do a coffee shop thrown out, it just makes me realize too that like we're limited by the zone and by what the zone will allow, and it won't allow for a coffee shop. So just having those little bits and feedback just I think will be important. If we're looking at Thursday, I wouldn't be able to meet after 2 o'clock.
I can't meet on Thursday,
Okay.
but I can Friday, anytime.
Friday's open for me.
If it was Friday, I need to do it before noon.
I will be on the river on Friday, so that does not work for me.
Thursday is definitely better for me, although I have that RTP meeting as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if lunch would work.
So noon on Thursday?
Yeah.
Kaylin, a dissenting opinion here, if you will. Maybe it's because I've in 6.5 hours of meetings today, and I'm really wiped. But I feel like that if you guys could get me the presentation, I could make a pretty decent independent opinion of what are priorities to me, just like you originally planned, and get that to you by tomorrow afternoon. I'm overwhelmed by hotspot work. It's other stuff that's going on, and I really don't want another meeting myself. I don't think I contribute much, but if you guys can get me the presentation, I'd be happy to fill out the spreadsheet tomorrow and think it would be useful to you.
And for what it's worth, I could do that as well. I feel like I could fill out the spreadsheet pretty clearly with what my priorities are.
Yeah.
And just a correction, when I said coffee shop, I really misspoke. I should have said like common area that the citizens could use for a variety of uses, whether it's having a kind of, so not a commercial kind of coffee shop, but kind of a common gathering space that they could use for a variety of uses, and they could bring their coffee or organize coffee. But yeah, I understand Caitlin did fill me in that that is a zoning question for, another time in the future of this, perhaps, whether that fits or not is another discussion, but we do think having those kind of common spaces would be a good amenity. So.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I think I figured that's what you were assuming, but I was just saying as an example, just, kind of heading us all into the right direction so that we don't funnel down into a place where we can't get together.
Yeah,
okay,
we'd love to get some more input. So that'd be great if we can organize some way to do that.
So it seems like Ronnie and Kaylin and Karen really want to have this meeting most importantly. And so would Thursday at what did I say before? Thursday at noon work for each of you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Summer, can you go ahead and schedule that Thursday at noon workshop with this team and the council?
Sure.
Does that work for you, Summer? I should ask that.
It does not. Carrie and I are both in all-day training, so we'll figure it out.
Okay. Carly, does that work on your end? I'm assuming you might.
No, I'm setting up the MRAC that morning, but maybe Joel can cover it.
Joel? It's like whack-a-mole. Who's gonna set up the Zoom? We'll figure it out. You're on mute, Joel. I can't hear you.
Just for an hour.
It's what?
I can be there for 1 hour. I have a 1 o'clock with the COVID task force.
Oh, okay. Well, you could likely peace out. What about 11 o'clock? Was that better for people?
I've been acting as the admin for the solid waste special service district meetings as well as chairing it. It's just not that big of a deal.
Yeah, you guys are fine to have it without us as long as we get the meeting set up.
It's summer. It's
required
just,
to have a city recorder.
yeah.
We'll make whatever work.
We'll figure it out.
Okay. All right, then noon on Thursday it is. Thank you so much for the project. I think you got us all very, very excited. I'm going to have very sweet dreams tonight thinking about the future of this project. And I'm really grateful to this team. I really think you're an awesome team and exactly what we hoped for. And appreciate your presentation and your patience with the council. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. We're really excited to work with you guys on this.
Okay, we'll see you soon. We'll see you Thursday. And we are going to move on in our meeting to new business 8.1, discussion and approval of a special event permit and special use of City Park for a 4th of July celebration, briefing and possible action. Because we are at 10:07. Oh, hi, Liz. I didn't know that you were joining. And you've been waiting in the wings for a while, I bet. Welcome. Did you prepare a presentation for this agenda item? And you're on mute, so I cannot hear you.
I said I did not. You're welcome.
Thanks so much. Okay, well, let me just say to the council, like, Liz has been working so hard to put this together. Karen earlier tonight brought up concerns about whether or not we would have vendors through the Chamber of Commerce, and whether or not we're feeling good about coronavirus and a special event like this. So probably should talk about that first.
Yeah, well, so as of yesterday, when I spoke with Lacey, she had 9 no's confirmed with the chamber, and she had 2 that she was waiting to talk to. So, I mean, just at this point, we don't have the same level of participation that we did last year.
What would be our threshold for participation?
As far as numbers go?
Number of vendors?
Number of vendors we could do on our permit, I believe we put 10 or 12 with social distancing.
I mean, like, if we only had 6, do we feel like that's enough to have a celebration?
Yeah, that's kind of up to you guys, because like worst case scenario, the way I picture it, right? We have volleyball. We do have lemonade for sure. We do have another person selling food. We should hear back from the DABC on that application anytime now about alcohol. So yeah.
We've got the Fiery Furnace Marching Band and some other acts from members of that band.
And then we have sprinklers and stuff for the kids. We did have somebody reach out to us about possibly ice cream and things like that. But again, I would have to check with the health department on that because it's got to be prepackaged. So
do we have Poison Spider doing bike races like last year?
There's not the same kind of interest considering the social distancing. And it's already, so here's kind of the lowdown. The businesses are kind of stressed anyways, trying to maintain social distance, wearing masks, having to wear masks when potentially it's 102 degrees out, and having to social distance is to ask that of employees is a little hard. And considering that, again, that the state is our COVID numbers are rising. Like I said, even though Moab is, we don't have any, and we would be the only town in the state of Utah having a 4th of July celebration, Mayor. So I know you're excited and you want to party, I get that. I just don't know how much sense it makes for in another week and a half.
Well, just to kind of talk to you about the mask situation. I mean, we've been doing summer camp with 10 kids in the 100-degree heat, and if they can wear a mask for, 7 hours, I think it's not that much to ask of the public. That's just my opinion, but.
Would masks be required at the event if people are 6 feet apart from one another?
No, but I think we have to encourage it.
Mm-hmm. Tawny?
Can we move to approve this, Mayor? And if it really just falls apart, if we don't do it, but we're also approving the Market on Center for the rest of the year, can we just see how it goes over the next few days? And
I would entertain that motion. Sounds like a motion.
okay, I move to approve a special event permit for the 4th of July celebration. The motion doesn't include the Market on Center, but I will include that in my motion.
Thank you, Tawny. Is there a second?
I'll second all that.
Thank you, Ronnie. Any further discussion for this evening? Play it by
Thank you
ear.
for the idea. It sounds very cool. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay, then I will call for a roll call vote. Ronnie?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. 8-2. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, guys.
Good night. 8-2. City comments on the September 2020 BLM oil and gas lease sale. Discussion and possible action. Kaylin, I'm going to turn this over to you.
I suspected that might happen. Thank you. So the BLM has issued an environmental assessment for a September oil and gas lease sale, which includes over 80,000 acres of land near Moab. And I forwarded to all of you a draft comment letter on that. The comment deadline is July 7th. This is our last regular meeting before then. So per Lori's suggestions, if we're going to send something as a council, we should approve it in open meeting. And this is our last chance unless we schedule another meeting. So I realize it's somewhat hasty. It might be a little bit hasty. I know the county is working on their own response, but they have a little bit more time just due to how their meetings are scheduled. So beyond that, there's a couple of factors, high-level factors. One is, do we just want to be in opposition to it, or do we want to try to take a more nuanced approach? The BLM in their, they will, in the EA, and apparently this is typical, they argue that least specific impacts can be dealt with at the time of the drilling permit, but that's kind of a punt because there's cumulative impacts, which should be, in my opinion, dealt with at the broad level lease sale, which haven't been. And then, and those are outlined, some of those high level cumulative impacts are outlined in the letter. But then if we want to take a more nuanced approach, we could say, well, this parcel is okay, but that parcel isn't for these reasons, but that will require more time and effort to develop that sort of comment. Another factor is that the county does get lease revenue. And as we discussed earlier, it does pass through to the cities. For instance, I mean, the city and the county both provide services to the same citizens. And so if the county has a budget shortfall, that impacts us, and that can be direct in terms of the MRAC. But that said, there is the federal government does have a royalty relief program, which has been substantial for leasing in Grand County. And I can get into the numbers on that, but currently the lease revenue is not nearly what it was a year ago. But it's late, so maybe I'll leave it at that unless more discussion on those specifics as needed.
So are you asking the council for clarification if they want to go full Monty with the proposed letter or take a little more time and do a nuanced?
Yes, thank you for that binary choice.
And the nuanced, I mean, you could get direction from the council and we could call a special meeting to just do a final approval if that's what the council wanted. Ronnie?
I'm willing to make a motion right now. I fully support the letter the way it's written. I think it's very indicative of what all this means for our recreation economy, but also our residents' quality of life. And it's completely consistent with all of the commitments we've made in terms of sustainability and our concerns about climate change. I have relatives up in Duchesne County and Duchesne, and I've been around blasting flares. And I can tell you it sounds like a jet engine landing under certain circumstances. And I can talk to you about fumes, and I can talk to you about other air impacts. And I don't want any part in telling future generations of Moab that I didn't do anything I could to stop them from having that come to their community. And everything else aside, I don't know how we can own our general plan by not opposing this. There are just so many elements of it that are inconsistent with who we are and what we claim to be trying to do for our community.
I will add.
Is that a motion?
Yeah,
let
that's
me-
a motion to sign this letter en masse as it is.
Thank
I
you.
read-
We'll put a date in it.
I'm fine with that too.
I will add that I did read the letter, made some minor edits to it, and I am.
Time out. Ronnie made a motion. I need to ask, is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Mike. Go ahead and talk. I apologize for interrupting you.
Oh, no, it's my fault. No, I agree with, I read the letter and agree entirely just as Ronnie said, so it's great.
Okay. Tani, sounds like you agree as well.
I do.
Okay, any further comments? I will call for the vote. Tani,
Aye.
Kaylin,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
Ronnie.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Great job. Number 9, approval of bills against the city of Moab. Is there a motion, Tani? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
No worries.
I move to approve the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $183,060.05.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Mike. Fun facts?
I don't have them in here with me.
Well, that's
There were
okay.
no fun facts.
I have no fun facts. Karen, did you want to comment on something?
You didn't do your chickens at 9:15.
Oh, well, while Brett was presenting, I walked out with my laptop, so I was able to continue to watch the presentation and do my chickens. Thank you. I smell skunk actually. So thank you. Oh gosh. Okay, I'm calling for the vote. Kaylin,
Aye.
Ronnie,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Tani.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. You're an awesome council. Zoom is definitely very different from our chambers. Tonight or earlier today, we had a meeting in the council chambers and it definitely felt good to be back in there. So I look forward to physically seeing all of you someday soon. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Kaylin. Second?
Aye. Will, second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We are adjourned. You'll have a really good night. Thanks for a great
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Aye.